The emergence of the Achaemenid Empire as the dominant force in the ancient Near East fundamentally altered the political landscape of the 6th century BC, creating conditions that would inevitably lead to confrontation with the Greek world. Under Cyrus II, known to history as Cyrus the Great, the Persians transformed from a relatively obscure tribal confederation in the Zagros Mountains into the architects of the largest empire the ancient world had yet witnessed. This transformation began around 559 BC when Cyrus assumed leadership of the Persian tribes and initiated a series of conquests that would establish Persian hegemony across vast territories stretching from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea. Cyrus's initial campaigns focused on consolidating Persian control over the Iranian plateau, defeating the Median Empire that had previously dominated the region. The fall of Ecbatana in 550 BC marked not merely a change in dynastic control, but represented the adoption of sophisticated administrative systems that the Persians would refine and expand throughout their subsequent conquests. The Persian approach to imperial governance differed markedly from previous Near Eastern empires through its systematic incorporation of local administrative practices and its relatively tolerant attitude toward local customs and religious practices, provided they did not threaten imperial stability. The westward expansion of Persian power accelerated dramatically following the consolidation of Iranian territories. Cyrus's forces moved against the Kingdom of Lydia, ruled by Croesus, whose wealth had become legendary throughout the Mediterranean world. The Lydian kingdom controlled crucial trade routes between Asia and Europe and had established the world's first coined money, making it an attractive target for Persian expansion. The campaign against Lydia demonstrated Persian military adaptability, as Cyrus's forces encountered cavalry-heavy armies and fortified urban centres that differed significantly from the tribal warfare of the Iranian plateau. The siege of Sardis in 546 BC showcased Persian engineering capabilities and strategic patience. Rather than attempting costly direct assaults against the city's formidable walls, Persian forces established a comprehensive blockade while engineers studied the fortress's defences. The eventual capture of Sardis came through a combination of military pressure and the exploitation of a poorly defended section of the citadel's walls, where Persian soldiers scaled the seemingly impregnable cliffs during a nighttime assault. The fall of Croesus and the incorporation of Lydian territories into the Persian Empire brought the Persians into direct contact with Greek settlements along the Anatolian coast for the first time. The Greek cities of Ionia had maintained complex relationships with the Lydian kingdom, paying tribute while retaining significant internal autonomy. These poleis had developed sophisticated commercial networks and had begun experimenting with various forms of self-governance that emphasized citizen participation in political decision-making. The transition from Lydian to Persian overlordship initially appeared to promise continuity, as Cyrus maintained existing administrative structures and confirmed local leaders in their positions. However, the fundamental differences between Persian imperial ideology and Greek concepts of political autonomy would gradually generate increasing tensions. Persian administrative practice involved the appointment of satraps, provincial governors who wielded extensive authority over their territories while remaining accountable to the great king. The satrapial system represented a sophisticated approach to governing diverse populations across vast distances, allowing for local adaptation while maintaining imperial unity through standardized tribute collection, military obligations, and loyalty oaths. The Ionian cities found themselves incorporated into the satrapy of Sardis, administered initially by Lydian nobles who had submitted to Persian authority, but later increasingly by Persian appointees or their trusted agents. The imposition of Persian administrative control introduced several novel elements that created friction with established Greek practices. The Persian concept of kingship, derived from ancient Near Eastern traditions, emphasized the absolute authority of the ruler as the earthly representative of Ahura Mazda, the chief deity of Zoroastrian religion. This ideology of divine kingship conflicted sharply with emerging Greek ideas about the relationship between rulers and ruled, particularly the growing emphasis on law as a constraint on arbitrary power and the notion that political authority derived from the consent of the citizen body. Persian tribute demands, while not necessarily more burdensome than previous Lydian requirements, operated according to different principles that highlighted these ideological differences. The Persian system viewed tribute as acknowledgement of the great king's supreme authority over all lands and peoples within the empire. Tribute collection involved elaborate ceremonies that emphasized the subordinate status of tributary peoples and their dependence on royal favour. These rituals, which included prostration before Persian officials and the presentation of tribute in contexts that emphasized Persian superiority, conflicted with Greek notions of personal dignity and civic pride. The Persian practice of taking hostages from prominent families in newly conquered territories also generated resentment among Greek elites. While presented as an honour, the requirement that leading citizens send their sons to the Persian courts served as a mechanism for ensuring loyalty, while providing the empire with a pool of culturally hybrid administrators who understood both Persian and local customs. Many young Greeks who spent formative years at the Persian court returned to their home cities with divided loyalties and perspectives that their fellow citizens viewed with suspicion. Cambyses II's accession to the Persian throne in 530 BC marked the continuation and intensification of imperial expansion. His successful conquest of Egypt in 525 BC demonstrated Persian military capabilities against one of the ancient world's most formidable kingdoms and extended Persian control to the Mediterranean's southern shores. The incorporation of Egypt into the Persian Empire created a strategic situation that effectively surrounded the Greek world, with Persian territories extending from the Black Sea to the Red Sea and from the Indus to the Nile. The Egyptian campaign revealed important aspects of Persian military organisation that would later influence their conflicts with Greek forces. Persian armies combined diverse ethnic contingents, each contributing specialised military capabilities while operating under unified command structures. The core of Persian military power consisted of the Immortals, an elite infantry force of exactly 10,000 men drawn primarily from Persian and Median nobility. These troops carried distinctive equipment including wicker shields, short spears, and powerful composite bows, and their training emphasized both individual combat skills and coordinated unit tactics. Persian military doctrine emphasized mobility and the integration of different combat arms, including heavy and light infantry, cavalry, and extensive archer formations. The empire's vast territorial extent necessitated military systems capable of rapid deployment across great distances and adaptation to diverse geographical and climatic conditions. Persian commanders demonstrated considerable tactical flexibility, incorporating effective practices from conquered peoples while maintaining disciplined command hierarchies that enabled complex coordinated operations. The administrative consolidation of Persian control over Ionian territories proceeded gradually but systematically. Persian officials conducted detailed surveys of their new territories, cataloguing population centres, agricultural resources, and commercial activities. This information supported the development of standardised tribute assessments that reflected each region's economic capacity, while ensuring adequate resources for imperial administration and military operations. The Persian approach to taxation differed from earlier systems through its emphasis on regular, predictable payments, rather than irregular exactions based on immediate military or political needs. Persian religious policies toward their Greek subjects reflected the empire's general approach to cultural diversity within its territories. While promoting Zoroastrian practices among Persian settlers and administrators, imperial authorities generally tolerated local religious customs, provided they did not challenge Persian political authority. Greek religious practices, centered on civic cults dedicated to patron deities of individual poleis, initially continued without significant interference. However, the Persian emphasis on royal authority as divinely sanctioned created potential conflicts with Greek religious traditions that emphasized the independence of local religious institutions. The economic integration of Ionian territories into the Persian Empire generated both opportunities and constraints that affected Greek commercial activities. Persian control over extensive trade routes created possibilities for expanded commercial relationships, particularly with territories in the empire's eastern regions that had previously been inaccessible to Greek merchants. The standardization of weights, measures, and currency across Persian territories facilitated long-distance trade while reducing transaction costs associated with currency exchange and measurement conversions. However, Persian economic policies also imposed new restrictions on Greek commercial autonomy. The empire's emphasis on centralized resource allocation meant that local authorities had reduced flexibility in responding to economic opportunities or challenges. Persian officials monitored commercial activities closely, both to ensure appropriate tribute collection and to prevent the development of economic relationships that might undermine imperial control. The requirement that significant commercial ventures receive approval from Persian administrators created bureaucratic obstacles that many Greek merchants found frustrating and economically damaging. The cultural encounters between Persians and Greeks in Ionia produced complex patterns of interaction that combined cooperation, resistance, and mutual adaptation. Persian administrators, recognizing the commercial and military value of Greek expertise, actively recruited Greek advisors, craftsmen, and soldiers for imperial service. Many Greeks found opportunities for advancement within Persian administrative hierarchies, particularly those willing to adopt Persian customs and demonstrate loyalty to imperial authorities. These cultural intermediaries played crucial roles in facilitating communication between Persian officials and Greek populations, while sometimes serving as advocates for their home communities. Conversely, many Greeks viewed Persian cultural practices with suspicion or hostility, interpreting Persian customs as evidence of moral corruption or political tyranny. Greek writers emphasized Persian luxury, elaborate court ceremonies, and the subordination of individuals to royal authority as contrast to Greek values of moderation, civic equality, and personal independence. These cultural stereotypes, while often inaccurate or exaggerated, reflected genuine differences in social organization and political philosophy that would influence subsequent Greek-Persian relations. The establishment of Persian garrisons in strategic locations throughout Ionia represented a visible symbol of imperial control that generated ongoing tensions with local populations. These military installations, staffed by Persian troops and their allies, served multiple functions, including territorial defense, tribute collection, and the suppression of local resistance. The presence of foreign soldiers in Greek cities created daily reminders of political subordination, while providing focal points for resentment against Persian rule. Persian diplomatic practices and their relations with Greek territories reflected imperial assumptions about the proper relationship between the great king and subordinate peoples. Persian officials expected Greek representatives to follow court protocols that emphasized Persian superiority and Greek dependence, including specific forms of dress, speech, and ceremonial behavior. These requirements conflicted with Greek diplomatic traditions that emphasized reciprocity and mutual respect between independent political entities, creating ongoing sources of friction in Persian-Greek negotiations. The mounting tensions between Persian administrative practices and Greek political traditions reached a critical threshold in 499 BC, when Aristagoras of Miletus transformed a personal political crisis into the catalyst for the most significant challenge to Persian authority in the western satrapies. Aristagoras, serving as deputy to the tyrant Histiaeus, who remained at the Persian court in Susa, found himself caught between competing pressures that would ultimately ignite 6 years of warfare across the Aegean world. The immediate trigger for revolt emerged from Aristagoras' failed expedition against the island of Naxos, undertaken with Persian support and resources. Artaphernes, the satrap of Sardis and brother of King Darius I, had approved this campaign as part of Persian efforts to extend imperial control over the Cycladic islands and establish naval bases closer to mainland Greece. The expedition's failure, attributed by Persian officials to Aristagoras' incompetence or possible treachery, placed the Milesian leader in an impossible position. Persian demands for compensation exceeded Miletus's financial capacity, while Aristagoras faced the prospect of removal from office and possible execution for his failure to achieve Persian objectives. The underlying causes of Greek discontent with Persian rule extended far beyond Aristagoras' personal difficulties, reflecting systemic problems that had developed over the previous half-century of imperial administration. Economic grievances centred on Persian tribute demands that had increased substantially under Darius II's administrative reforms. The new tribute assessment system, implemented around 518 BC, standardized payments across the empire but often failed to account for local economic conditions or temporary hardships. Ionian cities found themselves obligated to provide fixed amounts of silver, regardless of harvest failures, commercial disruptions, or other circumstances that affected their ability to generate revenue. Persian interference in local trade relationships created additional economic pressures that particularly affected merchant families who had traditionally dominated Ionian political life. The empire's emphasis on channeling commercial activities through approved agents and designated ports reduced the flexibility that Greek traders had previously enjoyed in responding to market opportunities. Persian officials monitored grain shipments, luxury goods, and manufactured products, imposing licensing requirements and inspection procedures that increased costs while reducing profit margins. These restrictions particularly affected the wine and olive oil trades that formed the backbone of many Ionian economies. Political oppression manifested through the Persian practice of supporting tyrants who would ensure loyalty to imperial authorities while suppressing local democratic movements. The installation of Persian-backed rulers represented a deliberate reversal of political trends that had been developing in many Greek cities towards broader citizen participation in governance. These appointed tyrants, dependent on Persian military support for maintaining power, often lacked the traditional legitimacy that came from local aristocratic connections or popular support, making them vulnerable to accusations of betraying their city's interests to foreign masters. The Persian requirement that Greek cities provide military contingents for imperial campaigns created additional sources of resentment. Young Greek men found themselves conscripted to fight in distant territories for causes that bore no relationship to their city's interests, while their absence disrupted local agricultural and commercial activities. The Persian practice of relocating populations within the empire, while not extensively applied to Greek territories, created fears that successful resistance might result in forced migration to distant provinces where Greek cultural identity could not be maintained. Religious and cultural tensions contributed to the growing alienation between Persian authorities and Greek populations. While the Persians generally tolerated local religious practices, their emphasis on royal authority as divinely sanctioned conflicted with Greek traditions of civic religious independence. Persian officials expected participation in ceremonies honouring the great king, which many Greeks interpreted as compromising their city's religious autonomy and their personal dignity as free citizens. The presence of Persian fire altars in major cities served as visible reminders of foreign religious practices that many Greeks viewed as incompatible with their ancestral traditions. When Aristagoras finally decided to rebel against Persian authority, he demonstrated considerable political acumen in transforming his personal crisis into a broader movement for Greek independence. Rather than simply fleeing Persian territory or attempting to negotiate a private settlement, he chose to abolish the tyranny in Miletus and establish a democratic government that could claim to represent the city's legitimate interests against foreign oppression. This constitutional change provided ideological legitimacy for resistance, while appealing to democratic sentiments that had been suppressed under Persian-backed tyrannical rule. The revolt spread rapidly across Ionian territories as Aristagoras dispatched agents to other Greek cities with promises of Persian weakness and assurances of outside support. The speed with which the rebellion expanded revealed the extent of accumulated grievances against Persian rule and the effectiveness of existing communication networks among Greek communities. Cities including Ephesus, Erythrae, and Clazomene expelled their Persian-appointed tyrants and declared independence, often accompanied by violent attacks on Persian officials and their local collaborators. Aristagoras' diplomatic mission to mainland Greece in 499 BC represented a crucial attempt to transform a regional rebellion into a broader Greek resistance movement against Persian expansion. His first destination was Sparta, where he presented King Cleomenes I with detailed arguments about Persian military weakness and the potential rewards of supporting Ionian independence. Aristagoras brought bronze maps showing the extent of Persian territories and the locations of major cities, emphasizing the wealth that could be captured through successful military action against the empire. The Spartan rejection of Aristagoras' appeal reflected the city's traditional reluctance to engage in overseas military commitments that might compromise domestic security or conflict with existing diplomatic relationships. Cleomenes reportedly dismissed Aristagoras when the Milesian leader revealed that the journey to Susa would require 3 months of travel, considering such distances incompatible with effective military operations. Spartan military doctrine emphasized rapid, decisive campaigns that could be completed without extended absence from Laconia, making involvement in distant Persian territories strategically unattractive. Athens presented a more receptive audience for Aristagoras' appeals, particularly given recent Athenian experiences with Persian diplomatic pressure. The Athenian democracy, established following the expulsion of the tyrant Hippias in 510 BC, had faced Persian demands for the restoration of their former ruler and had experienced direct threats to their independence. The Athenian Assembly's decision to provide 20 ships for the Ionian cause reflected both sympathy for fellow Greeks struggling against foreign domination and recognition that Persian expansion westward posed direct threats to Athenian security. The Eretrian commitment of 5 ships to support the Ionian revolt demonstrated the broader appeal of resistance to Persian expansion among Greek cities that valued their independence. Eritrea's participation reflected that cities' commercial connections with Ionian territories and concerns about Persian naval expansion in the Aegean that could threaten Euboean trade routes. The combined Athenian and Eretrian naval commitment, while modest compared to the scale of Persian military resources, provided the Ionian rebels with crucial psychological support and evidence that their cause had attracted sympathy beyond their immediate region. The arrival of Athenian and Eretrian forces in Ionia during 498 BC transformed the character of the revolt from a regional uprising into an international conflict with broader implications for Greek-Persian relations. The Athenian contingent, commanded by experienced officers who had participated in recent military reforms, brought disciplined hoplite formations and tactical expertise that complemented Ionian manpower. The Eretrian contribution, though smaller, included skilled sailors and marines who enhanced rebel naval capabilities for operations against Persian coastal installations. The rebel decision to attack Sardis represented a bold strategic gamble designed to demonstrate Persian vulnerability while capturing resources necessary for sustaining prolonged resistance. Sardis, as the administrative centre of Persian authority in western Anatolia, contained substantial treasure reserves, military supplies, and documentation that could provide intelligence about Persian defensive preparations. The city's capture would also serve symbolic purposes by showing that Persian power could be successfully challenged, and that the empire's supposedly invincible military reputation was exaggerated. The march inland from Ephesus towards Sardis required careful coordination between Greek contingents from different cities with varying military traditions and command structures. The combined force numbered several thousand hoplites supported by light infantry and cavalry units drawn from multiple Ionian cities. The rebels moved rapidly through the Hermus River Valley, avoiding Persian garrison posts while gathering intelligence about Sardis's defences and the disposition of enemy forces in the region. The assault on Sardis succeeded beyond the rebels' expectations, with Persian defenders apparently caught unprepared for a major attack on their provincial capital. The lower city fell quickly to Greek assault, with Persian troops and administrative personnel retreating to the citadel, while rebel forces occupied residential and commercial districts. However, the accidental burning of much of Sardis, including a temple sacred to the Lydian goddess Cybele, transformed what might have been a calculated military operation into an act that Persian authorities could characterize as religious sacrilege and barbarian destruction. The fire at Sardis, whether started deliberately or through accident during the fighting, had profound strategic consequences that extended far beyond immediate military considerations. Persian propaganda emphasized the destruction of religious sites as evidence of Greek disrespect for divine authority and civilized conduct, providing justification for harsh retaliatory measures against rebel territories. The burning also eliminated much of the wealth that the rebels had hoped to capture, reducing the material benefits of their successful assault, while creating lasting Persian resentment that would influence subsequent imperial policies toward Greek populations. Persian military response to the Ionian revolt demonstrated the empire's capacity for systematic coordinated operations across multiple theatres, while revealing tactical adaptations designed to counter Greek military advantages. Artaphernes, as satrap of Sardis, assumed overall responsibility for suppressing the rebellion while coordinating with other Persian commanders operating in different regions. The Persian approach emphasized dividing rebel forces and preventing coordinated resistance through simultaneous attacks on multiple targets, forcing Greek cities to defend their own territories rather than concentrating forces for major offensive operations. Daurices, one of Artaphernes' principal subordinates, received command of substantial Persian forces tasked with recapturing rebel cities in the northern Ionian regions. His operations demonstrated Persian tactical flexibility in adapting to Greek defensive methods while exploiting advantages in mobility and logistics that came from imperial control over inland territories. Persian forces could move rapidly between targets using established road networks while maintaining supply lines that extended back to the empire's heartland, advantages that Greek rebel forces could not match. The Persian siege of Abydos illustrated imperial military methods designed to minimize casualties among Persian troops while maximizing psychological pressure on defending populations. Rather than attempting costly direct assaults against fortified positions, Persian commanders established comprehensive blockades that prevented food supplies from reaching besieged cities, while offering terms for surrender that promised lenient treatment for populations that submitted promptly. These tactics proved effective against cities that lacked adequate food stores or external support, forcing surrenders that preserved Persian manpower for operations against more determined resistance. Persian naval operations under the command of experienced Phoenician captains represented a crucial component of imperial strategy for suppressing the Ionian revolt. The Persian fleet, drawn primarily from Phoenician, Egyptian and Cilician contingents, possessed significant advantages in numbers, experience and logistics over hastily assembled Greek naval forces. Persian naval doctrine emphasized coordinated operations between fleet units and land forces, enabling amphibious assaults on coastal cities while preventing rebel forces from receiving supplies or reinforcements by sea. The gradual isolation of rebel cities through Persian military pressure revealed the fundamental strategic weaknesses of the Ionian cause. Without sustained support from mainland Greek states or the development of effective central command structures, individual cities found themselves facing the full weight of Persian military power with only limited assistance from their neighbours. The Persian strategy of offering favourable surrender terms to cities that submitted early created incentives for defection, while demonstrating that continued resistance would result in increasingly harsh treatment. The fall of Miletus in 494 BC marked the effective end of organised resistance to Persian authority in Ionia, though scattered fighting continued for several additional years. The siege of Miletus demonstrated Persian capabilities for conducting complex military operations that combined land and naval forces in coordinated assaults on heavily fortified positions. Persian engineers constructed siege works that isolated the city from external support, while Persian naval forces prevented evacuation or resupply attempts, creating conditions that made prolonged resistance impossible. The final assault on Miletus involved systematic destruction of the city's defences through coordinated attacks that overwhelmed Greek defensive capabilities. Persian forces breached the walls at multiple points while naval units landed troops behind Greek defensive lines, creating tactical situations that Greek commanders could not effectively counter with available resources. The city's capture was followed by brutal retribution that served as an example to other Greek communities of the consequences of defying Persian authority. Persian reprisals against Miletus and other rebel cities demonstrated imperial determination to prevent future uprisings through exemplary punishment that would deter potential resistance movements. The systematic destruction of Miletus's walls, harbours, and public buildings eliminated the city's capacity for future military resistance, while the deportation of substantial portions of the population removed potential leadership for a renewed rebellion. These measures, while effective in preventing immediate resistance, created lasting resentment among Greek populations that would influence subsequent Greek-Persian relations and contribute to the broader conflicts that would define the early 5th century BC. The brutal suppression of the Ionian revolt left King Darius facing a strategic situation that demanded decisive action beyond the mere restoration of imperial control over rebellious territories. The participation of Athens and Eretria in the assault on Sardis had transformed what might have been dismissed as a regional uprising into a direct challenge to Persian imperial prestige and the fundamental principle of royal authority that underpinned Achaemenid rule. Persian administrative documents from this period, preserved in the archives at Persepolis, reveal the systematic nature of Darius's planning for retribution against the mainland Greek states that had dared to interfere in imperial affairs. Darius's conception of kingship, rooted in Zoroastrian theology and ancient Near Eastern traditions of divine monarchy, required that challenges to royal authority receive proportionate responses that would demonstrate the futility of resistance while deterring future rebellions. The Behistun inscription, carved into a cliff face in western Iran to commemorate Darius's consolidation of power, proclaimed the king's role as Ahura Mazda's chosen instrument for establishing order and justice throughout the world. From this ideological perspective, Athenian and Eretrian support for the Ionian rebels represented not merely political opposition, but cosmic disorder that threatened the divine harmony that Persian rule was meant to establish and maintain. Persian intelligence networks, developed through decades of imperial expansion, provided Darius with detailed information about Greek political conditions that influenced his strategic planning for operations against Athens and Eretria. Persian agents operating in Greek territories had observed the factional conflicts that characterized Athenian democracy, the ongoing tensions between aristocratic and popular elements that created opportunities for external manipulation. The recent expulsion of the tyrant Hippias from Athens had left substantial numbers of Athenian aristocrats alienated from the democratic government, creating potential collaborators for Persian political warfare designed to destabilize Athenian resistance. The Persian approach to punishing Athens reflected sophisticated understanding of Greek political psychology and the symbolic importance of demonstrating imperial power to audiences throughout the Mediterranean world. Darius's advisors recognized that successful military action against Athens would serve multiple strategic purposes, eliminating a source of potential support for future rebellions in Persian territories, demonstrating Persian military capabilities to other Greek states that might consider resistance, and providing opportunities to install friendly governments that would ensure future Greek cooperation with imperial policies. Persian diplomatic preparations for the invasion revealed the empire's systematic approach to psychological warfare and political manipulation designed to isolate Athens and Eretria from potential allies. Throughout 491 BC, Persian ambassadors travelled to Greek cities demanding earth and water as traditional symbols of submission to the great king's authority. These diplomatic missions served multiple functions beyond simple tribute collection, providing Persian intelligence officers with opportunities to assess Greek military preparations, identify potential collaborators, and gauge popular sentiment regarding resistance to Persian expansion. The symbolism of earth and water carried profound religious and political significance within Persian imperial ideology, representing the submission of all natural elements to royal authority and acknowledging the king's divine mandate to rule over all territories and peoples. Greek cities that provided these tokens implicitly accepted Persian sovereignty and obligated themselves to support imperial military operations, including potential campaigns against other Greek states. The diplomatic language used in these negotiations emphasized Persian clemency towards submissive peoples, while threatening severe punishment for those who refused to acknowledge imperial authority. The Persian embassy to Athens produced a dramatic confrontation that revealed the depth of Athenian hostility toward Persian expansion and the democratic government's determination to resist imperial pressure. The Athenian assembly's decision to execute Persian ambassadors violated fundamental diplomatic conventions that even enemies typically respected, demonstrating the intensity of Athenian anger over Persian support for Hippias and previous Persian threats to Athenian independence. This action provided Darius with additional justification for military action, while eliminating any possibility of negotiated settlement between the empire and Athens. Spartan treatment of Persian ambassadors followed similar patterns, with King Cleomenes reportedly having the Persian envoys thrown into a well while declaring that they could find earth and water at the bottom. These violent responses to Persian diplomatic overtures reflected Greek understanding that submission to Persian demands would effectively end their political independence and transform their cities into imperial dependencies governed according to Persian administrative practices. The symbolic nature of these rejections communicated Greek determination to resist Persian expansion regardless of the military consequences. The failure of Mardonius's expedition in 492 BC provided crucial lessons that shaped subsequent Persian strategic planning, while revealing the challenges that imperial forces would face in conducting operations in the Greek geographical environment. Mardonius, Darius's son-in-law and one of the empire's most experienced military commanders, had received responsibility for the initial phase of operations against Athens and Eretria, with instructions to establish Persian naval bases in the northern Aegean, while demonstrating imperial military power to Greek populations throughout the region. The Persian fleet assigned to Mardonius's command represented one of the largest naval forces assembled during the early Achaemenid period, combining Phoenician, Egyptian, Cilician and Ionian contingents under unified Persian command. The fleet's composition reflected the empire's practice of utilizing specialized naval expertise from different regions while maintaining Persian officers in overall command positions. Phoenician captains contributed extensive experience in Mediterranean navigation and naval warfare. while Egyptian shipbuilders provided vessels designed for operations in diverse weather conditions and sea states. Persian military planners had apparently underestimated the navigational challenges presented by the Aegean Sea's complex geography and unpredictable weather patterns. The mountainous coastlines of northern Greece created wind patterns that differed significantly from conditions in the Persian Gulf or the eastern Mediterranean, where imperial naval forces had gained most of their operational experience. The numerous islands, rocky shores and sudden storms that characterized Aegean sailing conditions required navigational skills and local knowledge that many Persian naval commanders lacked. The destruction of much of Mardonius's fleet in a storm off Mount Athos demonstrated the vulnerability of large naval formations to sudden weather changes in the confined waters of the northern Aegean. Persian sources suggest that several hundred ships were lost along with thousands of sailors and marines, representing a significant reduction in available naval forces for subsequent operations. The storm's impact was magnified by the Persian practice of sailing in large, concentrated formations that maximized command control but increased vulnerability to simultaneous losses from weather or enemy action. Mardonius's land forces encountered different but equally challenging problems in their operations against Thracian tribes that controlled territories north of the Aegean. The Persian army's logistical requirements, designed for operations in the relatively flat terrain and established road networks of the empire's core territories, proved difficult to maintain in the mountainous regions of Thrace, where local populations could disrupt supply lines through guerrilla tactics. Thracian warriors, fighting on familiar terrain with superior knowledge of local conditions, inflicted significant casualties on Persian forces while avoiding decisive engagements that would have allowed Persian numerical superiority to determine outcomes. The Persian experience in Thrace revealed important tactical lessons about the limitations of imperial military doctrine when applied to European geographical conditions and fighting methods. Persian cavalry, which formed a crucial component of imperial military power, proved less effective in heavily forested and mountainous terrain, where mobility was restricted and traditional cavalry tactics could not be employed effectively. Persian infantry formations, designed for operations in open terrain where coordinated movements and archery could be utilized to maximum advantage, found themselves at disadvantages in close terrain, where individual combat skills and local knowledge became more important factors. These military setbacks forced Persian commanders to reconsider their strategic approach to operations against Greek territories, while providing valuable intelligence about Greek military capabilities and geographical challenges. Persian military engineers conducted detailed studies of Aegean navigation routes, identifying safer passages that would reduce weather-related risks while maintaining operational flexibility. Persian intelligence officers interviewed survivors from Thracian operations to gather information about European fighting methods and terrain conditions that would influence future campaign planning. The lessons learned from Mardonius's expedition influenced Darius's decision to modify Persian strategic planning for subsequent operations against Athens and Eretria. Rather than attempting to establish permanent Persian bases in northern Greece that would require extensive logistical support and ongoing military commitments, the revised Persian strategy emphasized rapid amphibious operations designed to achieve specific political objectives before withdrawing to secure Persian territories. This approach would minimize exposure to adverse weather conditions while reducing the logistical challenges that had contributed to Mardonius's difficulties. Persian strategic planning for the 490 BC campaign reflected sophisticated analysis of Greek political conditions and military capabilities, combined with careful attention to the geographical and logistical factors that had affected previous operations. Darius appointed Artaphernes the Younger, nephew of the satrap of Sardis, and Datis, an experienced Median commander with extensive knowledge of Greek affairs, to joint command of the expedition with specific instructions to focus their efforts on punishing Athens and Eretria, while demonstrating Persian power to other Greek states. The selection of these commanders demonstrated Persian recognition of the specialized knowledge required for successful operations in the Greek environment. Artaphernes possessed intimate familiarity with Greek political conditions through his family's administrative responsibilities in Ionia, while his Persian royal connections ensured that his authority would be respected by diverse imperial contingents. Datis brought extensive military experience from campaigns in various parts of the empire, including operations against nomadic peoples that had required tactical flexibility and adaptation to unfamiliar fighting conditions. Persian military preparations for the campaign involved assembling specialized forces designed specifically for amphibious operations against fortified Greek cities. The expedition's naval component emphasized fast, maneuverable vessels capable of rapid deployment and withdrawal rather than the massive formations that had proven vulnerable to weather in Mardonius's campaign. Persian engineers developed new ship designs that incorporated lessons learned from previous Aegean operations, while maintaining the carrying capacity necessary for transporting substantial military forces across open water. The Persian army assembled for the campaign represented a carefully selected force that balanced diverse military capabilities with the logistical constraints of amphibious operations. The expedition included substantial contingents of Persian and Median infantry, supported by specialized archer units and cavalry forces transported aboard specially designed horse-carrying vessels. The inclusion of experienced siege engineers and their equipment demonstrated Persian intentions to conduct formal siege operations against fortified Greek cities rather than relying solely on intimidation or political manipulation to achieve their objectives. Persian intelligence preparations for the campaign involved extensive reconnaissance of potential landing sites along the Greek coast and detailed analysis of the defensive capabilities of target cities. Persian agents, operating under various covers including merchant activities and diplomatic missions, gathered information about harbour facilities, beach conditions and inland routes that would influence tactical planning for amphibious assaults. This intelligence network also monitored Greek military preparations and political developments that might affect the timing and objectives of Persian operations. The Persian decision to bring Hippias, the former Athenian tyrant, as an advisor and potential puppet ruler demonstrated imperial intentions to establish friendly governments rather than simply punishing rebellious cities through military action alone. Hippias's presence with the Persian expedition served multiple strategic purposes, providing local knowledge about Athenian political conditions and military capabilities, offering legitimacy for Persian claims to be restoring rightful authority rather than imposing foreign rule, and creating opportunities for political warfare designed to divide Athenian resistance through appeals to his remaining supporters. The Persian fleet carrying Artaphernes and Datis approached Euboean waters in late summer 490 BZ with methodical precision that reflected months of careful planning and intelligence gathering. The expedition's first target, Eritrea, had been selected not merely for its participation in the Ionian Revolt, but as a demonstration of Persian military efficiency that would serve psychological warfare purposes throughout the Greek world. The city's location on Euboea's western coast provided Persian commanders with an ideal testing ground for their amphibious assault techniques, while offering a secure base for subsequent operations against Athens. Eritrean defensive preparations revealed both the strengths and limitations of Greek military responses to Persian invasion threats. The city's walls, constructed during the previous century to defend against regional conflicts, incorporated sophisticated defensive features including overlapping fields of fire for archers and carefully designed gates that would channel attacking forces into predetermined killing zones. However, these fortifications had been designed primarily for conflicts with other Greek cities, employing similar tactical methods and equipment, not for sustained siege operations by imperial forces with extensive engineering capabilities and unlimited time for conducting systematic assaults. The Persian approach to Eritrea demonstrated imperial mastery of psychological warfare combined with overwhelming logistical superiority. Rather than attempting immediate assault, Persian forces established comprehensive siege lines that isolated the city from external support, while Persian engineers began construction of siege works designed to breach the walls through systematic pressure rather than costly direct attacks. Persian commanders offered terms for surrender that promised lenient treatment for the population, while emphasizing the futility of resistance against imperial military power. Persian siege techniques at Eritrea incorporated lessons learned from decades of imperial expansion across diverse geographical and cultural environments. Persian engineers constructed massive earthworks that elevated Persian archers to positions where they could fire over Eritrean walls while protecting Persian infantry from defensive missile fire. These engineering works required enormous quantities of earth and timber, resources that Persian logistical systems could provide through their control of Euboean countryside and their ability to conscript local labour for construction projects. The systematic nature of Persian siege operations created psychological pressures that proved as effective as direct military action. Eritrean defenders could observe the steady progress of Persian engineering works, while recognising that their own resources for prolonged resistance were strictly limited. The city's food supplies, adequate for normal circumstances, became critical constraints when Persian blockade prevented resupply from rural areas or allied cities. Persian control of surrounding territories also eliminated opportunities for Eritrean forces to conduct raids that might disrupt Persian siege operations or capture supplies necessary for extended defence. Persian intelligence operations within Eritrea exploited existing political divisions that had developed during recent conflicts over the city's participation in the Ionian Revolt. Some Eritrean aristocrats had opposed involvement in the rebellion, arguing that the city's commercial interests would be better served by accommodation with Persian power rather than futile resistance that would inevitably result in destruction. Persian agents cultivated these dissenting voices through promises of favourable treatment and positions in a Persian-sponsored government, creating internal pressures that complemented external military threats. The fall of Eritrea after 6 days of siege operations demonstrated Persian capabilities while revealing the vulnerabilities that would affect Greek defensive strategies throughout the Persian Wars. The city's surrender came through betrayal by prominent citizens who opened gates to Persian forces rather than through successful assault against the walls, illustrating the political dimensions of Persian military success. Persian treatment of the captured city followed established imperial practices designed to maximize psychological impact on potential future opponents, while providing practical benefits for imperial administration. Persian forces systematically destroyed Eritrea's defensive walls and harbour facilities, eliminating the city's capacity for future military resistance while demonstrating the consequences of opposing imperial authority. The destruction was conducted with calculated precision rather than random violence, targeting military installations and symbols of civic independence while preserving economic infrastructure that could contribute to imperial revenues. Persian engineers demolished temples that had served as centres for anti-Persian political activities, while preserving commercial buildings and residential areas that represented economic value. The deportation of Eritrean population to Persian territories served multiple imperial purposes beyond simple punishment for rebellion. Persian administrative practice involved relocating conquered peoples to regions where their specialized skills could contribute to imperial development, while removing potential leadership for future resistance movements. Eritrean craftsmen and merchants were settled in Persian territories where their expertise in maritime commerce and manufacturing could support imperial economic development, while their distance from Greece eliminated opportunities for renewed rebellion. Persian naval operations during the Eritrean siege demonstrated imperial mastery of combined arms tactics that integrated land and sea forces in coordinated operations. Persian ships maintained blockade positions that prevented Greek relief expeditions from reaching Eritrea, while providing logistical support for land forces conducting siege operations. The Persian fleet's mobility allowed commanders to respond rapidly to changing tactical situations while maintaining communications with imperial headquarters and other Persian forces operating in different theatres. Following Eritrea's destruction, Persian forces loaded their equipment and prepared for the final phase of their expedition against Athens. The selection of Marathon as a landing site reflected careful analysis of Athenian geographical conditions and defensive capabilities. The plain of Marathon offered several advantages for Persian military operations: extensive flat terrain suitable for deploying cavalry and archer formations, adequate water supplies for large military forces, and proximity to Athens that would force Athenian forces to respond rapidly without extensive preparation time. Marathon's distance from Athens, approximately 26 miles by the most direct route, created tactical opportunities that Persian commanders hoped to exploit through rapid movement and superior mobility. Persian cavalry could potentially advance on Athens while Athenian forces remained concentrated at Marathon, forcing the Athenians to divide their forces or abandon their defensive positions. The plain's size allowed Persian forces to deploy in formations that would maximize their advantages in archery and cavalry, while minimizing the effectiveness of Greek heavy infantry tactics. Persian intelligence regarding Athenian political conditions suggested that rapid military success might trigger internal conflicts that would facilitate Persian objectives without requiring extensive siege operations. Hippias, accompanying the Persian expedition as advisor and potential puppet ruler, provided detailed information about Athenian factional divisions and identified prominent citizens who might support Persian-sponsored government changes. Persian commanders hoped that decisive military victory at Marathon would demonstrate Athenian military weakness while creating opportunities for political warfare designed to destabilize democratic resistance. The Athenian response to news of Eritrea's fall revealed both the strengths and limitations of democratic decision-making under military pressure. The Athenian assembly convened in emergency session to consider defensive options, while messengers carried appeals for assistance to Sparta and other potential allies. Athenian military preparations demonstrated the effectiveness of recent military reforms, while exposing the challenges of coordinating defensive operations across diverse geographical terrain with limited time for strategic planning. Miltiades emerged as the dominant figure in Athenian strategic planning through his unique combination of military experience and intimate knowledge of Persian tactical methods. His service as tyrant of the Thracian Chersonese had provided direct experience with Persian military operations and administrative practices, while his participation in the Ionian Revolt had given him detailed understanding of Persian strengths and vulnerabilities. Miltiades possessed crucial intelligence about Persian cavalry tactics, archer formations, and command structures that other Athenian generals lacked. The Athenian decision to march to Marathon rather than defending behind the city's walls reflected Miltiades' influence and his understanding of Persian tactical advantages in siege operations. Athenian walls, while formidable by Greek standards, could not withstand prolonged assault by Persian siege engines and engineering techniques that had proven effective against more heavily fortified positions throughout the empire. Marathon's terrain offered opportunities for Greek heavy infantry to engage Persian forces under conditions that would minimize Persian advantages in archery and cavalry, while maximizing Greek strengths in close combat. Athenian military preparations revealed the effectiveness of Cleisthenes' military reforms in creating coordinated forces from diverse tribal and regional contingents. The Athenian army that marched to Marathon represented approximately 10,000 hoplites, drawn from all 10 tribes established by Cleisthenic constitutional reforms, with each tribal contingent contributing roughly 1,000 warriors under the command of elected generals. This organisation provided balanced representation from different regions of Attica, while ensuring that military leadership reflected democratic political principles. Athenian equipment and training demonstrated the high standards that characterized Greek heavy infantry during this period. Athenian hoplites carried bronze-faced shields approximately 3 feet in diameter, iron-tipped spears 8 feet in length, and iron swords for close combat. Their bronze helmets, breastplates and greaves provided substantial protection against missile weapons, while allowing sufficient mobility for aggressive offensive tactics. The uniformity of Athenian equipment reflected both civic pride and practical recognition that coordinated formations required standardized gear for maximum effectiveness. The arrival of Plataean reinforcements at Marathon provided crucial support for Athenian forces while demonstrating the effectiveness of Athenian diplomatic relationships with smaller Greek cities. Plataea's contribution of approximately 1,000 hoplites represented a significant commitment from a city whose total military-age population was limited, reflecting genuine alliance rather than mere token assistance. Plataean military quality matched Athenian standards, with well-trained hoplites equipped according to contemporary Greek military practices and experienced in regional conflicts that had provided practical combat training. Persian deployment at Marathon revealed imperial confidence in traditional tactical methods that had proven successful throughout decades of conquest across diverse geographical and cultural environments. Persian forces established their camp near the shore, where their fleet could provide logistical support and potential evacuation routes if military operations required tactical withdrawal. The Persian army deployed in formations that emphasized their advantages in archery and light infantry, while positioning cavalry units to exploit opportunities for flanking movements or pursuit operations. Persian tactical doctrine at Marathon reflected standard imperial practices for engaging heavy infantry formations through coordinated missile attacks followed by cavalry charges designed to disrupt enemy formations before committing infantry forces to close combat. Persian archers, drawn from various imperial contingents including Scythian and Persian units, possessed superior range and rate of fire compared to Greek missile weapons. Persian cavalry, including both light horse archers and heavy cavalry equipped for shock action, could maneuver rapidly across the plain's flat terrain while seeking tactical advantages that would minimize exposure to Greek spear formations. The Persian battle line at Marathon extended across much of the plain's width, demonstrating imperial ability to deploy substantial forces in coordinated formations despite the logistical challenges of amphibious operations. Persian infantry contingents included immortals and other elite units supported by diverse imperial troops representing the empire's multicultural military organization. The center of the Persian line contained the most experienced and heavily equipped troops, while the wings included lighter forces with greater mobility but less staying power in prolonged combat. Miltiades' tactical innovation at Marathon represented one of the most brilliant strategic decisions in ancient military history, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of both Greek and Persian military capabilities combined with willingness to accept calculated risks in pursuit of decisive victory. His decision to weaken the Greek centre while strengthening the wings contradicted conventional Greek tactical doctrine, but reflected accurate analysis of Persian deployment patterns and fighting methods. This tactical modification would transform what appeared to be a hopeless confrontation into an opportunity for complete victory. The Greek formation at Marathon stretched across approximately 1 mile of front, matching the Persian deployment while maintaining sufficient depth to provide staying power in close combat. Miltiades positioned tribal contingents according to a carefully calculated plan that placed the most experienced troops on the wings, where they would face Persian forces that included substantial numbers of lightly armed troops and allied contingents. The Greek centre, deliberately thinned to provide additional strength for the wings, contained citizen soldiers whose courage and determination would be tested by direct confrontation with elite Persian infantry. The stunning Greek victory at Marathon sent shockwaves throughout the Persian Empire and fundamentally altered the political landscape of the Aegean world. Darius I's carefully planned expedition had ended in catastrophic defeat, with thousands of Persian troops dead on the battlefield and the empire's reputation for military invincibility shattered before Greek audiences who had witnessed their hoplites routing supposedly invincible imperial forces. The news of Marathon's outcome spread rapidly through Persian administrative networks, reaching Persepolis within weeks and prompting immediate reassessment of imperial strategy toward Greek territories. Within Athens, however, the aftermath of Marathon revealed complex political tensions that would shape the city's preparation for inevitable Persian retaliation. Miltiades, the architect of Greek victory, found his position as Athens' preeminent military leader, challenged by rivals who questioned his post-battle conduct and accused him of using his military reputation to advance personal political ambitions. The Athenian democratic system's inherent suspicion of individual prominence created opportunities for political opponents to undermine even successful commanders through legal proceedings that could result in exile or death. The prosecution of Miltiades following his failed expedition against Paros in 489 BC demonstrated the volatile nature of Athenian politics and the democratic system's tendency to turn against leaders who appeared to threaten collective governance through excessive personal authority. Miltiades had requested substantial Athenian resources for what he claimed would be a profitable campaign against Persian allies in the Cycladic Islands, but his inability to capture Paros despite extensive siege operations provided his enemies with evidence of military incompetence and possible corruption. The charges brought against him included deceiving the Athenian people about the expedition's prospects and wasting public resources on personal vendettas. Miltiades' death in prison while awaiting trial eliminated Athens' most experienced Persian war commander and created a leadership vacuum that ambitious politicians moved quickly to fill. His family faced enormous financial penalties imposed by the Athenian courts, including a fine of 50 talents that threatened to bankrupt his household and eliminate his political influence permanently. These proceedings revealed the harsh realities of Athenian democratic justice, or even heroes of Marathon could face destruction through legal mechanisms designed to prevent the concentration of excessive power in individual hands. The rise of Themistocles as Athens' dominant political figure emerged from this leadership crisis through his skillful manipulation of democratic institutions and his prescient understanding of Persian strategic intentions. Unlike Miltiades, whose authority derived primarily from military accomplishments, Themistocles built his influence through mastery of Athenian political processes and his ability to articulate strategic visions that appealed to diverse constituencies within the citizen body. His background as a member of a relatively modest aristocratic family required him to cultivate popular support rather than relying on traditional elite networks for political advancement. Themistocles' strategic vision centered on the recognition that Persian naval power posed the greatest long-term threat to Athenian independence, and that Athens could only survive future Persian attacks through the development of superior naval capabilities. His analysis of Marathon's lessons emphasized that Greek victory had resulted from favorable tactical circumstances that could not be replicated in future conflicts where Persian commanders would avoid the mistakes that had led to their defeat. Persian naval superiority would allow future expeditions to bypass Greek defensive positions while threatening Athenian territory from multiple directions simultaneously. The discovery of rich silver veins in the Laurium mines during 483 BC provided Themistocles with the financial resources necessary to implement his naval strategy, but required sophisticated political maneuvering to convince the Athenian assembly to invest these windfall revenues in military preparations, rather than distributing them as payments to individual citizens. Traditional Athenian practice involved sharing such unexpected wealth among the citizen body, with each citizen receiving a payment of 10 drachmae that represented substantial income for working-class families. Themistocles' proposal to use the silver for naval construction required him to overcome popular expectations of immediate financial benefit in favour of long-term strategic investments. Themistocles' political campaign for naval expansion demonstrated his mastery of democratic rhetoric and his ability to present complex strategic arguments in terms that ordinary citizens could understand and support. He emphasized the economic benefits that would result from expanded Athenian naval power, including increased trade revenues and opportunities for employment in shipbuilding and related industries. His speeches to the assembly portrayed naval construction as an investment in Athenian prosperity rather than merely military preparation, appealing to commercial interests that had grown increasingly important in Athenian political calculations. The technical challenges of expanding the Athenian fleet required substantial innovations in shipbuilding techniques and harbour facilities that would support operations by large numbers of triremes. Athenian shipwrights developed new construction methods that reduced building time while maintaining the structural integrity necessary for naval combat operations. The trireme design adopted by Athens incorporated lessons learned from previous naval conflicts while emphasizing speed and maneuverability over the heavier construction that characterized merchant vessels or older warship designs. Athenian naval preparations involved more than simply constructing ships, requiring the development of training programs that would produce skilled crews capable of executing complex tactical maneuvers under combat conditions. Trireme operations demanded precise coordination between rowers, helmsmen, and marine contingents, with successful ramming attacks requiring split-second timing and exceptional seamanship. The Athenian program for training naval personnel drew on the city's existing maritime expertise while developing new techniques specifically designed for military operations against Persian naval forces. The expansion of Piraeus harbour facilities represented a massive engineering project that transformed Athens' relationship with the sea while providing the infrastructure necessary for maintaining large naval forces. Athenian engineers constructed new harbour basins, shipyards and storage facilities that could accommodate hundreds of triremes while providing protection from weather and enemy attack. These construction projects employed thousands of workers and stimulated economic development throughout Attica as demand for timber, bronze and other naval construction materials increased dramatically. Themistocles' ostracism of political rivals, particularly Aristides, demonstrated his ruthless approach to consolidating power while eliminating opposition to his naval policies. The ostracism process, designed to prevent tyranny through the temporary exile of citizens who gained excessive influence, became a tool for removing political opponents who challenged Themistocles' strategic vision or competed for popular support. Aristides, known for his reputation for justice and integrity, represented an alternative leadership model that emphasized traditional Greek military methods over Themistocles' innovative naval strategy. The political conflict between Themistocles and Aristides reflected broader debates within Athenian society about the city's future direction and the appropriate response to Persian threats. Aristides advocated policies that emphasized land-based military strength and alliance relationships with other Greek cities, arguing that Athens could best defend itself through conventional hoplite forces supported by diplomatic agreements with Sparta and other major powers. His approach reflected traditional Greek military thinking while questioning the enormous costs and risks associated with Themistocles' naval expansion program. Meanwhile, Persian preparations for renewed operations against Greece proceeded with systematic thoroughness that reflected Darius's determination to avenge Marathon and establish permanent imperial control over Greek territories. The king's death in 486 BZ transferred responsibility for these preparations to his son Xerxes, whose accession to the throne coincided with rebellions in Egypt and Babylon that required immediate attention before resources could be devoted to Greek campaigns. These internal challenges delayed Persian operations while providing Greek cities with additional time for defensive preparations. Xerxes' consolidation of power within the Persian Empire demonstrated his political and military capabilities, while revealing his determination to complete his father's unfinished business in Greece. The suppression of Egyptian and Babylonian revolts required sophisticated military operations that showcased Persian administrative efficiency and military effectiveness under the new king's leadership. These campaigns also provided Xerxes with opportunities to test military innovations and tactical modifications that would influence subsequent operations against Greek territories. Persian intelligence gathering during this period involved extensive reconnaissance of Greek defensive preparations and political conditions that would affect the success of future military operations. Persian agents operating throughout the Greek world reported on Athenian naval construction, Spartan military activities, and political developments in cities that might support or oppose Persian expansion. This intelligence network provided Persian planners with detailed information about Greek capabilities, while identifying potential allies and sources of internal conflict that could be exploited during military operations. The scale of Persian military preparations for the Greek expedition exceeded anything previously attempted in ancient warfare, requiring coordination between diverse imperial territories and the mobilization of resources from across the known world. Persian engineers began construction of massive supply depots along proposed invasion routes, while developing logistical systems capable of supporting armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands. These preparations involved contributions from every satrapy of the empire, and demonstrated the administrative sophistication that had made Persian expansion possible across such vast territories. Persian naval preparations involved assembling fleets from throughout the empire's maritime territories, combining Phoenician, Egyptian, Cilician, and Ionian contingents under unified Persian command. The size of this naval force reflected Persian recognition that control of the sea would be crucial for successful operations against Greek territories, particularly given Greek improvements in naval capabilities since Marathon. Persian naval commanders studied reports of Athenian naval expansion, while developing tactical methods designed to counter Greek innovations in ship design and crew training. The construction of bridges across the Hellespont represented one of the most ambitious engineering projects of the ancient world, demonstrating Persian technical capabilities while symbolizing imperial determination to overcome geographical obstacles that had previously limited military operations. Persian engineers designed pontoon bridges capable of supporting the passage of enormous armies, along with their equipment, supplies, and support personnel. The bridge's construction required precise calculations of current patterns, weather conditions, and structural loads that tested the limits of contemporary engineering knowledge. Greek responses to intelligence reports about Persian preparations revealed the complex political dynamics that characterized intercity relationships during this critical period. While some Greek cities recognized the necessity of coordinated resistance to Persian expansion, traditional rivalries and competing interests complicated efforts to develop unified defensive strategies. Sparta's leadership in military affairs conflicted with Athens' growing naval power and political influence, creating tensions that Persian diplomats hoped to exploit through careful manipulation of Greek factional conflicts. The Congress of Corinth in 481 BC represented an unprecedented achievement in Greek political cooperation, bringing together representatives from cities that had maintained hostile relationships for generations. The formation of the Hellenic League required participating cities to suspend existing conflicts while committing resources to collective defense against Persian invasion. This agreement involved complex negotiations about command structures, resource contributions, and strategic priorities that reflected the diverse interests and capabilities of the member cities. Spartan acceptance of leadership roles within the Hellenic League demonstrated that cities' recognition of the Persian threat's magnitude, while revealing Spartan willingness to compromise traditional isolationist policies when faced with existential challenges. Spartan military reputation and organizational capabilities made their leadership essential for effective resistance, but their participation required assurances about Athenian naval ambitions and guarantees that League operations would not compromise Spartan domestic security. These negotiations established command arrangements that balanced Spartan military expertise with Athenian naval capabilities while accommodating the interests of smaller member cities. Athenian participation in the Hellenic League required Themistocles to balance his city's growing power with the diplomatic necessities of maintaining Greek unity against Persian invasion. Athenian naval strength provided crucial capabilities for League operations, but Athenian political ambitions created suspicions among other member cities about Athens' long-term intentions. Themistocles' diplomatic skills proved essential for maintaining League cohesion while advancing Athenian strategic interests through careful management of intercity relationships and competing priorities. The Persian mobilization that began in earnest during 481 BC represented the largest coordinated military effort in human history to that point, dwarfing even the massive campaigns that had established Achaemenid dominance across 3 continents. Xerxes' determination to succeed where his father had failed manifested in preparations of unprecedented scope, drawing upon the administrative expertise and material resources of an empire that stretched from the Indus Valley to the shores of the Black Sea. Persian scribes working in the archives at Persepolis recorded requisitions for supplies, equipment and personnel that reveal the staggering magnitude of the undertaking. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers drawn from 46 different nations and peoples, naval contingents representing every maritime province of the empire, and logistical arrangements that required the coordination of supply lines extending across thousands of miles. The composition of Xerxes' army reflected the cosmopolitan character of Persian imperial administration, while demonstrating the empire's ability to integrate diverse military traditions into coherent fighting forces. The Persian and Median contingents formed the expedition's core, numbering approximately 10,000 immortals plus additional Persian infantry units equipped with distinctive wicker shields, short spears and powerful composite bows. These troops represented the empire's military elite, trained from childhood in warfare and bound by personal oaths of loyalty to the great king. Their equipment combined practical effectiveness with symbolic significance, as the gold and silver decorations on their weapons and armour proclaimed Persian royal authority, while their standardized gear enabled coordinated tactical movements. Surrounding this Persian nucleus, contingents from throughout the empire brought specialized military capabilities that reflected their regional traditions and geographical environments. The Scythian horse archers provided unmatched mobility and firepower, their skills honed through generations of warfare on the Eurasian steppes, where survival depended on the ability to strike swiftly and withdraw before enemies could respond effectively. Ethiopian troops carried distinctive shields made from crane skins and wielded long bows capable of penetrating armour at considerable distances, while their leopard and lion-skin cloaks mark them as warriors from the empire's southernmost territories. The Indian contingents included both infantry armed with cotton armour and reed arrows, and cavalry mounted on horses and even war elephants, representing military technologies unfamiliar to Greek defenders. Thracian and Paeonian troops brought expertise in mountain warfare and knowledge of European terrain that would prove valuable during operations in northern Greece. Arab camel cavalry provided reconnaissance capabilities and desert warfare experience, while Egyptian marines contributed naval combat skills developed through centuries of Nile River operations and Red Sea navigation. Persian logistical planning for the expedition required innovations in supply management that pushed contemporary administrative capabilities to their limits. The army's size necessitated consumption of enormous quantities of food, water, and equipment that could not be obtained through traditional foraging methods without devastating the territories through which Persian forces would march. Persian engineers calculated that the expedition would require approximately 400,000 medimene of grain per month, equivalent to the annual production of substantial agricultural regions, plus corresponding amounts of meat, wine, and other provisions necessary for maintaining fighting effectiveness. The Persian solution involved establishing supply depots at strategic locations along the planned invasion route, with each depot stocked according to careful calculations of the army's anticipated needs during different phases of the campaign. These installations required massive construction projects that employed thousands of workers and consumed resources from across the empire. Depots in Thrace and Macedonia contained grain shipped from Egypt and Mesopotamia, dried fish from the Black Sea, wine from Persian territories in Anatolia, and manufactured goods, including weapons, tools, and clothing produced in workshops throughout the empire. Persian engineers also developed innovative solutions for transporting supplies across the challenging terrain between Asia and Europe. The construction of the Athos Canal represented one of the most ambitious engineering projects of the ancient world, designed to eliminate the navigational hazards that had destroyed much of Mardonius's fleet during the previous expedition. The canal, approximately 1.5 miles in length, required excavation through the rocky peninsula connecting Mount Athos to the mainland, involving an estimated 20,000 workers labouring for over 2 years to complete the project. The canal's construction demonstrated Persian engineering capabilities while serving important strategic and symbolic purposes. From a practical standpoint, the waterway allowed Persian ships to avoid the dangerous waters around Mount Athos, where sudden storms and treacherous currents had previously caused substantial losses. The project also proclaimed Persian mastery over natural obstacles, demonstrating imperial power to reshape geography itself in service of royal objectives. Persian propaganda emphasized the canal as evidence of Xerxes' divine authority and the empire's unlimited resources for overcoming any challenge to imperial expansion. The bridges across the Hellespont represented even more spectacular engineering achievements that required solutions to unprecedented technical challenges. Persian engineers designed 2 parallel bridges spanning the approximately 1 mile width of the strait, using hundreds of ships as pontoons connected by massive cables and covered with planking capable of supporting the passage of heavy military equipment. The first bridge utilised 314 ships, while the second employed 360 vessels, with both structures incorporating sophisticated anchoring systems designed to withstand the strong currents and sudden weather changes characteristic of the Dardanelles. The bridge construction revealed Persian mastery of materials science and structural engineering that surpassed contemporary Greek capabilities. The cables connecting the pontoon vessels were manufactured from flax and papyrus, using techniques that produced tensile strength sufficient to maintain structural integrity under extreme stress. Persian engineers calculated load distributions and stress patterns with remarkable precision, designing safety margins that ensured the bridges could support not only the army's passage, but also the psychological impact of demonstrating Persian technical superiority to Greek observers. The bridge's completion required approximately 6 months of intensive work by specialists drawn from throughout the empire, including Phoenician naval engineers, Egyptian rope manufacturers, and Persian military architects. The project's scale necessitated the coordination of diverse technical traditions, while maintaining unified command structures that ensured consistent quality standards. Persian quality control procedures included regular testing of materials and structural components, with defective elements replaced immediately to prevent failures that could compromise the entire project. Persian naval preparations paralleled the army's mobilization in scope and complexity, assembling fleets that represented the maritime power of the entire empire. The Persian navy combined approximately 1,200 triremes with hundreds of additional vessels, including supply ships, horse transports, and specialized craft designed for specific operational requirements. Phoenician contingents provided the fleet's backbone, contributing approximately 300 triremes manned by experienced crews with extensive Mediterranean navigation experience. Egyptian naval forces added another 200 vessels along with specialised knowledge of sailing conditions in different seasonal patterns. Ionian Greek cities, now firmly under Persian control following the suppression of their revolt, contributed approximately 100 triremes manned by crews whose local knowledge of Aegean waters would prove valuable during operations against their former allies. Cilician and Cypriot contingents brought additional specialised capabilities, including experience with amphibious operations and coastal warfare. The diversity of the Persian fleet created challenges for unified command and tactical coordination, but also provided flexibility and redundancy that enhanced overall operational effectiveness. Persian naval doctrine for the Greek expedition emphasised coordinated operations between fleet units and land forces, with ships providing logistical support, reconnaissance capabilities, and tactical flexibility that would enable rapid response to changing operational conditions. Persian naval commanders planned to establish temporary bases along the Greek coast that would support extended operations while providing secure communications with the main army. The fleet's size would allow Persian forces to conduct simultaneous operations against multiple Greek positions while maintaining naval superiority that could prevent Greek reinforcements or supplies from reaching threatened areas. As Persian preparations neared completion during early 480 BC, Greek intelligence networks provided increasingly detailed reports about the expedition's unprecedented scale that forced Greek strategic planners to reconsider their defensive options. The initial Greek strategy had envisioned holding defensive positions at the Tempe Pass in Thessaly, where the narrow valley between Mount Olympus and Mount Ossa offered geographical advantages similar to those that had proven effective at Marathon. The pass's restricted width would limit Persian ability to deploy their numerical superiority, while forcing attacking forces to advance through terrain that favoured Greek heavy infantry tactics. Greek reconnaissance of the Tempe position revealed both its potential advantages and serious strategic limitations that ultimately led to its abandonment as a primary defensive line. The pass itself offered excellent defensive terrain, with steep slopes on both sides that would prevent Persian flanking movements, while channeling attacks into narrow frontages where Greek hoplite formations could maintain tactical cohesion. The position also controlled the primary invasion route from Macedonia into central Greece, forcing Persian armies to either assault the position directly or undertake lengthy detours through more difficult terrain. However, detailed examination of the broader strategic situation revealed that the Tempe position could be bypassed through alternative routes that would allow Persian forces to outflank Greek defenders without engaging them directly. Persian control of the sea enabled amphibious operations that could land troops south of the Greek position, while mountain paths through the Olympus range, though difficult, remained passable for determined forces willing to accept the challenges of operating in rugged terrain. Additionally, the position's distance from major Greek population centres meant that defending forces would face serious logistical challenges in maintaining adequate supplies for prolonged operations. The political dimensions of defending Thessaly also created complications that influenced Greek strategic calculations. Many Thessalian aristocrats had already indicated willingness to collaborate with Persian forces, viewing imperial victory as inevitable and seeking to preserve their local authority through accommodation rather than resistance. This political unreliability meant that Greek forces defending the Tempe position could face not only Persian military pressure, but also potential betrayal by local allies, who might provide intelligence to Persian commanders or actively assist Persian flanking movements. The Greek decision to abandon the Tempe position and withdraw to more defensible terrain further south reflected realistic assessment of these strategic and political constraints, combined with recognition that Greek forces needed defensive positions that maximised their tactical advantages while minimizing exposure to Persian numerical superiority and logistical capabilities. The withdrawal also acknowledged the need to concentrate Greek forces at positions where they could receive adequate supplies and reinforcements while maintaining communications with the broader Greek alliance. The selection of Thermopylae as the primary Greek defensive position demonstrated sophisticated understanding of both tactical requirements and strategic necessities that would determine the campaign's outcome. The pass, located approximately 100 miles north of Athens, offered geographical advantages that surpassed those available at Tempe, while providing better strategic positioning for coordinated defensive operations. The narrow gap between the mountains and the sea, at its narrowest point only about 50 feet wide, would force Persian attackers to advance in columns that could be engaged effectively by relatively small Greek forces fighting in coordinated phalanx formations. Thermopylae's defensive advantages extended beyond simple geographical constraints to include features that would enhance Greek tactical effectiveness, while limiting Persian ability to exploit their superior numbers and diverse military capabilities. The pass's configuration prevented Persian cavalry from operating effectively, eliminating one of the empire's primary tactical advantages, while forcing Persian infantry to attack across terrain that favoured Greek heavy infantry methods. The position's proximity to the sea also enabled coordination with Greek naval forces operating in the nearby Straits of Artemisium, creating opportunities for combined operations that could maximise Greek defensive capabilities. The Greek force assembled to defend Thermopylae reflected both the Hellenic League's commitment to collective resistance and the practical constraints that limited Greek military mobilization. King Leonidas of Sparta led the expedition with a personal guard of 300 Spartiate warriors, the cream of Spartan military society whose selection followed rigorous criteria that ensured only men with living sons could participate, guaranteeing continuation of family lines regardless of battle outcomes. These Spartan warriors represented the pinnacle of Greek military training and discipline, their equipment and tactics refined through generations of constant warfare and professional military service. Supporting the Spartan contingent, approximately 700 Thespians volunteered to remain at Thermopylae, despite having opportunities to withdraw when the position's hopelessness became apparent. Their decision reflected civic devotion and personal honour that exemplified the values motivating Greek resistance to Persian expansion. Additional forces included 1,000 Phocians, assigned to defend the mountain path that offered the only feasible route for outflanking the main Greek position, plus various other contingents that brought the total Greek force to approximately 7,000 men. The Greek defensive plan at Thermopylae relied on coordinated operations with the Greek fleet positioned at Artemisium, where Athenian naval forces under Themistocles' strategic direction would engage the Persian fleet while preventing amphibious landings that could outflank the land position. This coordination required precise timing and communications that tested Greek organisational capabilities while providing opportunities for tactical flexibility that could exploit Persian weaknesses or respond to changing operational conditions. Persian forces approaching Thermopylae encountered defensive preparations that demonstrated Greek understanding of the position's tactical requirements and their determination to maximize its defensive potential. Greek engineers had constructed walls across the narrowest sections of the pass, while preparing positions that would channel Persian attacks into predetermined killing zones where Greek weapons and tactics would prove most effective. These preparations reflected careful study of Persian military methods combined with realistic assessment of Greek capabilities and limitations in confronting the approaching imperial army. The stage was now set for one of history's most famous military encounters, where a small force of Greek warriors would attempt to hold a narrow mountain pass against the largest army the ancient world had ever assembled. The strategic implications extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation, as success or failure at Thermopylae would determine whether Greek resistance could continue or whether Persian imperial expansion would proceed unopposed into the heart of the Greek world. The crushing defeat at Thermopylae sent shockwaves through the Greek defensive network, transforming what had been a coordinated resistance strategy into a desperate scramble for survival. As news of Leonidas's last stand reached Athens, the city's population faced the stark reality that no natural barrier now stood between Xerxes' vast army and their homes. The narrow pass that was supposed to hold the Persian advance for weeks had fallen in just 3 days, leaving the Athenian assembly to confront the most momentous decision in their city's history: whether to stand and fight behind their walls or abandon everything they held sacred in hopes of preserving their people and their democratic ideals. Themistocles, whose naval preparations had consumed Athenian resources and political energy for the past 3 years, now found his strategic vision put to the ultimate test. The Delphic oracle's cryptic prophecy about wooden walls became the focal point of increasingly desperate debates within the Athenian assembly, as citizens grappled with interpretations that would determine their city's fate. The traditional interpretation, favoured by older citizens and conservative elements, held that the oracle referred to the ancient wooden palisade that had once surrounded the Acropolis, suggesting that the gods counselled defence of the city's sacred heart through conventional fortification and divine protection. Themistocles argued with characteristic boldness that the oracle's meaning was far more revolutionary, insisting that the wooden walls represented Athens' newly constructed fleet of triremes. His interpretation required Athenians to abandon not only their homes and possessions, but also the fundamental assumption that a city's identity was inseparable from its physical location and ancestral shrines. The wooden walls of ships, he argued, would preserve what truly mattered about Athens: its people, their democratic institutions, and their capacity for independent action. This radical reading of divine will challenged every traditional understanding of civic duty and religious obligation, demanding that Athenians place their trust in an untested naval strategy, rather than the protection of familiar gods in familiar places. The oracle's reference to Salamis as divine provided additional ammunition for Themistocles' interpretation, though even his supporters struggled with the implications of his strategic vision. The prophecy spoke of Salamis bringing death to women's sons, which pessimists interpreted as foretelling Athenian naval disaster, while Themistocles countered that the ambiguous phrasing more likely referred to Persian casualties in waters where Greek seamanship would prove superior to imperial numbers. These theological debates carried enormous practical consequences, as different interpretations of divine will would lead to fundamentally different military strategies with no possibility of compromise or middle ground. The evacuation decree that emerged from these agonizing deliberations represented one of the most remarkable decisions in ancient political history, requiring an entire population to abandon everything that defined their civic identity in pursuit of an uncertain future. The formal language of the decree, preserved on stone inscriptions, reveals the careful balance Themistocles struck between practical necessity and religious propriety. The evacuation was presented not as abandonment of the gods, but as obedience to divine will, with provisions for maintaining essential religious observances even while the city lay empty. Women, children, and elderly citizens would be transported to Troezen and Aegina, while men of military age would serve aboard the fleet that would carry Athens' hopes for survival and eventual return. The logistics of evacuating perhaps 200,000 people within a matter of weeks tested Athenian organizational capabilities to their limits, while revealing the social solidarity that democratic institutions had fostered during the previous generation. Wealthy citizens provided ships and supplies for the evacuation, while accepting the loss of property and status that abandonment would entail. Poorer citizens, who owned little beyond their citizenship rights and family relationships, faced the psychological trauma of leaving ancestral graves and neighbourhood shrines that connected them to generations of Athenian identity. The evacuation process required countless individual acts of courage and sacrifice, as families separated and communities dissolved in the face of approaching Persian forces. Persian scouts observing the Athenian evacuation reported back to Xerxes with intelligence that must have seemed almost incredible, an entire city voluntarily destroying itself rather than submitting to imperial authority. From the Persian perspective, trained in traditions where cities fought to the death or surrendered to preserve their populations and property, the Athenian decision appeared to represent either cowardice or madness. Persian commanders had prepared for siege operations against Athenian walls, not for the challenge of governing an empty city whose population had vanished like morning mist before the advancing army. The Persian occupation of Athens in September 480 BC marked the culmination of Xerxes' campaign objectives, while revealing the hollow nature of his apparent victory. Persian forces entered a city that retained its physical structures but had lost everything that gave those structures meaning and value. The streets that should have echoed with the sounds of commerce and daily life lay silent except for the footsteps of Persian soldiers exploring buildings whose purposes they could barely comprehend. The agora, where Athenian democracy had taken root and flourished, became a staging area for Persian military operations, its political significance lost on occupiers who had never experienced government by popular assembly. Xerxes himself entered Athens with the ceremonial pomp appropriate to a great king claiming victory over rebellious subjects, but the empty city mocked his triumph even as it fulfilled his strategic objectives. Persian royal ideology required visible submission from conquered peoples, including elaborate ceremonies where local leaders acknowledged imperial authority and populations demonstrated their acceptance of Persian rule. The absence of any Athenian officials to receive royal clemency, or any citizens to witness Persian magnanimity, transformed what should have been a moment of supreme political theatre into an empty gesture performed before an audience of Persian courtiers and soldiers. The systematic destruction of Athenian religious sites represented both practical military policy and symbolic statement about the consequences of defying Persian authority. Persian forces methodically demolished the temples on the Acropolis, including the ancient shrine of Athena Polias that housed the sacred olive-wood statue, believed to have fallen from heaven as a gift from the city's patron goddess. The destruction extended beyond military necessity to encompass a deliberate assault on Athenian religious identity, eliminating the sacred spaces where civic rituals had reinforced community solidarity and democratic values. The burning of the Acropolis created a pillar of smoke visible for miles across the Attic plain, serving as a beacon that proclaimed Persian victory to any Greeks who might still harbour thoughts of resistance. Persian engineers ensured that the destruction was thorough and systematic, toppling walls, smashing sculptures, and scattering the sacred objects that had accumulated over centuries of religious devotion. The flames that consumed wooden architectural elements and offerings created an inferno that burned for days, its glow reflecting off the waters of the Saronic Gulf, where Greek ships waited in the harbours of Salamis. Persian treatment of Athenian religious sites reflected imperial policies designed to demonstrate the superiority of Persian royal authority over local gods while eliminating focal points for future resistance movements. The destruction served practical purposes by denying potential rebels the psychological reinforcement that sacred spaces provided, while the systematic nature of the demolition proclaimed that Persian power extended even over divine protection that Greeks had trusted for their security. Persian fire altars established among the ruins symbolized the replacement of Greek religious traditions with Persian imperial ideology centered on royal authority as the earthly manifestation of the divine will. The few Athenians who remained in the city during the Persian occupation, mostly elderly citizens who had refused evacuation, and a handful of religious officials determined to maintain essential rituals, faced systematic persecution designed to extract information about Greek defensive preparations while demonstrating the futility of resistance. Persian interrogation methods, refined through decades of imperial administration, combined physical coercion with psychological pressure that exploited Greek attachments to family, property, and religious obligations. The information gathered through these procedures provided Persian commanders with intelligence about Greek morale, strategic planning, and potential weaknesses that could be exploited in future operations. Meanwhile, the Greek fleet concentrated at Salamis faced internal divisions that threatened to destroy the Hellenic League just as Persian victory appeared complete. The Peloponnesian contingents led by Spartan Admiral Eurybiades advocated immediate withdrawal to the Isthmus of Corinth, where land and sea forces could coordinate defensive operations that would protect the Peloponnese, even if Attica and central Greece fell permanently under Persian control. This strategy reflected traditional Greek defensive thinking that emphasized protecting core territories rather than attempting to hold advanced positions that might become untenable under sustained Persian pressure. Themistocles found himself fighting a desperate political battle to maintain Greek naval unity, while advancing his conviction that Salamis offered the best opportunity for decisive victory against the Persian fleet. His arguments emphasized the tactical advantages that the narrow waters around Salamis would provide for Greek triremes, whose superior construction and crew training could overcome Persian numerical superiority if battles could be fought under conditions that prevented the Persians from deploying their full strength simultaneously. The confined waters would also limit Persian tactical flexibility, while enabling Greek commanders to concentrate their forces at decisive points where coordinated attacks could achieve maximum impact. The strategic debate within the Greek fleet reflected fundamental disagreements about the nature of the Persian threat and the most effective methods for countering imperial expansion. Peloponnesian commanders viewed the Persian invasion primarily as a territorial conquest that could be defeated through conventional defensive strategies focused on protecting Greek heartland territories behind prepared positions. Their approach emphasized the preservation of existing Greek political structures and territorial arrangements, while accepting the loss of peripheral areas that could be recovered through future offensive operations once Persian forces withdrew or were defeated. Themistocles' vision encompassed broader strategic objectives that required not merely stopping Persian expansion, but inflicting such decisive defeat on imperial forces that future Persian expeditions would become politically impossible within the empire's internal power structures. His analysis suggested that Persian imperial ideology could not sustain major military defeats without triggering internal challenges to royal authority that would force the empire to concentrate on domestic consolidation rather than foreign expansion. This strategic approach required accepting greater immediate risks in pursuit of more complete long-term security for Greek independence. The geographic constraints of Salamis harbour created both opportunities and dangers that would determine the battle's outcome through factors that neither Greek nor Persian commanders could fully control in advance. The narrow channels between Salamis and the Attic mainland would indeed limit Persian ability to deploy their numerical superiority, but the same restrictions would also prevent Greek forces from withdrawing if the battle turned against them. Greek crews would fight with the desperation of men who knew that defeat meant death or slavery, while Persian forces would enjoy the confidence of warriors who had experienced nothing but victory throughout their westward advance. Themistocles' masterstroke came through his manipulation of Xerxes' expectations and strategic assumptions, exploiting the Persian king's desire for decisive victory and his unfamiliarity with Greek political dynamics. Through his slave Sicinus, a trusted household member whose loyalty was beyond question, Themistocles conveyed a message to Persian headquarters that appeared to offer intelligence about Greek defensive weaknesses, while actually luring Persian forces into tactical positions that would maximize Greek advantages. The message claimed that Greek morale was collapsing and that many contingents were preparing to withdraw under cover of darkness, creating an opportunity for Persian forces to attack while Greek unity was fragmenting. Sicinus' mission required exceptional courage and acting ability, as discovery would have meant certain death and probably torture designed to extract information about Greek strategic planning. The slave had to present himself convincingly as a defector, motivated by self-preservation rather than loyalty to his master, while providing intelligence that seemed valuable enough to influence Persian tactical decisions without appearing so convenient as to arouse suspicion. His success in reaching Persian commanders and delivering his message without detection represented a crucial intelligence operation that would determine the campaign's ultimate outcome. The Persian response to this intelligence revealed both Xerxes' strategic acumen and his fatal misunderstanding of the tactical situation developing around Salamis. The king recognized the opportunity to destroy the Greek fleet while it remained concentrated in restricted waters, eliminating the primary threat to Persian naval supremacy while preventing Greek forces from dispersing to defensive positions that would be more difficult to attack. Persian naval commanders received orders to position their forces for coordinated attacks that would prevent Greek withdrawal while maximizing Persian advantages in numbers and tactical flexibility. Persian fleet movements during the night preceding the battle demonstrated the Imperial Navy's organizational capabilities, while positioning forces according to tactical plans that would have proven effective against conventional opponents operating under normal strategic constraints. Persian ships moved into positions that blocked potential Greek escape routes, while concentrating attack formations that could deliver overwhelming force against Greek defensive positions. The complexity of these nocturnal maneuvers, involving hundreds of ships operating in confined waters during darkness, showcased Persian naval discipline and command effectiveness that had made imperial expansion possible across vast maritime territories. As dawn approached on the morning that would determine the fate of Greek independence, both fleets prepared for battle with the knowledge that the day's outcome would reshape the political landscape of the entire Mediterranean world. Persian crews, drawn from the empire's most experienced maritime peoples, readied their ships with confidence born from decades of successful naval operations and the visible evidence of Persian military superiority that surrounded them on every side. Greek sailors, facing odds that appeared hopeless to any rational calculation, prepared to fight for the survival of everything that gave their lives meaning and purpose, knowing that defeat would mean not merely death, but the extinction of the political and cultural values that define their identity as free citizens of independent cities. The narrow straits between Salamis and the Attic mainland became a cauldron of naval warfare as the Persian fleet moved into attack positions during the pre-dawn hours of late September 480 BC. Xerxes had positioned his golden throne on the slopes of Mount Aegaleos, where he could observe the impending destruction of Greek naval power while his scribes recorded the names of commanders who distinguished themselves in what promised to be the final act of his European campaign. The Persian king's confidence reflected reasonable strategic calculations. His fleet outnumbered the Greeks by at least 2-1. His crews included the most experienced maritime warriors from across the empire, and the Greeks appeared trapped in waters that would prevent effective withdrawal once battle commenced. The Persian naval formation that entered the Salamis Straits represented the culmination of imperial maritime power, with Phoenician squadrons forming the fleet's backbone through their centuries of Mediterranean navigation experience. These vessels, constructed in the shipyards of Sidon and Tyre, incorporated design innovations that emphasized both speed and durability, with reinforced bronze rams capable of shattering enemy hulls and elevated fighting platforms that gave Persian marines tactical advantages in boarding operations. Egyptian contingents brought different tactical approaches developed through Nile River warfare, while Ionian Greek ships provided crews with intimate knowledge of local water conditions and seasonal wind patterns that could prove decisive in confined waters. Persian tactical doctrine emphasized coordinated attacks by multiple squadrons designed to overwhelm Greek defensive positions through simultaneous pressure from different directions. The fleet's organization reflected imperial administrative principles, with contingents from different satrapies operating under unified command while maintaining their specialized capabilities and fighting methods. Persian naval commanders planned to exploit their numerical superiority by forcing the Greeks to divide their attention between multiple threats, preventing coordinated defensive responses while creating opportunities for individual Persian squadrons to achieve local superiority at decisive points. The restricted waters of the Salamis Channel, however, began to reveal tactical complications that Persian planners had not fully anticipated. The narrow passages between islands and mainland prevented the Persian fleet from deploying in the extended battle lines that would maximize their numerical advantages, while forcing ships to advance in columns that reduced their ability to provide mutual support during combat operations. Persian vessels found themselves constrained by geographical features that limited their maneuverability, while exposing them to concentrated Greek attacks from positions that the defenders had selected according to their intimate knowledge of local conditions. Greek tactical preparations reflected Themistocles' sophisticated understanding of both Persian naval methods and the specific geographical advantages that Salamis waters offered to defenders willing to accept the risks of fighting in confined spaces. The Greek fleet, numbering approximately 380 triremes with the Athenian contingent providing nearly half of this total, had positioned itself to exploit the channel's natural features while maintaining tactical flexibility that would enable rapid concentration of force at critical moments. Greek commanders understood that their survival depended on transforming the battle into a series of individual ship-to-ship encounters where superior Greek seamanship and crew training could overcome Persian numerical superiority. Athenian triremes represented the pinnacle of contemporary naval technology, with hull designs that emphasized speed and agility over the heavier construction favored by merchant vessels or older warship types. These ships measured approximately 120 feet in length, with beam widths of 18 feet, dimensions that provided optimal balance between structural strength and hydrodynamic efficiency. The bronze-sheathed rams that extended from their prows could deliver devastating impact against enemy vessels when driven by the coordinated efforts of 170 rowers whose training had reached levels of precision that enabled split-second tactical maneuvers during combat operations. Greek crew composition reflected the democratic principles that had motivated Athenian naval expansion, with citizens serving alongside metics and even slaves whose freedom could be earned through distinguished service in defense of the city. This social integration created powerful motivational factors that Persian commanders, accustomed to hierarchical military organizations based on ethnic and class distinctions, failed to appreciate. Greek rowers understood that they were fighting not merely for their lives but for their political rights and social status within communities where naval service had become a pathway to full citizenship and economic opportunity. The initial Persian advance into the straits proceeded according to established imperial tactical doctrine, with lead squadrons moving forward to engage Greek defensive positions, while follow-up forces prepared to exploit opportunities created by the initial assault. Persian ships advanced in disciplined formations that demonstrated the organizational capabilities that had enabled imperial expansion across vast maritime territories, their bronze-reinforced hulls gleaming in the morning sunlight, while Persian, Median, and Immortal marines prepared for boarding operations that would decide individual ship encounters through hand-to-hand combat. Greek defensive positioning exploited the channel's geography to create tactical situations where Persian numerical superiority became a disadvantage rather than an asset. The narrow waters prevented Persian ships from maneuvering freely while forcing them to advance through passages where Greek vessels could engage them individually or in small groups, rather than facing the full weight of imperial naval power simultaneously. Greek commanders had positioned their strongest squadrons at points where the channel's configuration would channel Persian attacks into predetermined killing zones, where coordinated Greek responses could achieve maximum effectiveness. The first clashes between opposing fleets revealed the tactical advantages that Greek preparations had created, while demonstrating the effectiveness of Athenian naval training in actual combat conditions. Greek triremes, operating in familiar waters under commanders who understood every current and wind pattern, achieved ramming attacks that shattered Persian hulls with devastating effectiveness. The bronze rams, driven by precisely coordinated rowing that generated tremendous kinetic energy, penetrated Persian ship sides with impacts that created massive structural damage, while the momentum of Greek vessels carried them clear of immediate Persian retaliation. Persian attempts to respond with their own ramming attacks encountered difficulties created by the confined waters and Greek tactical superiority in close-quarters maneuvering. Persian ships, designed for operations in open waters where their size and stability provided advantages, found themselves outmaneuvered by smaller, more agile Greek vessels whose crews could execute complex tactical movements with split-second precision. Greek helmsmen, trained through years of intensive practice in Athenian waters, demonstrated ship-handling skills that enabled them to position their vessels for optimal ramming angles while avoiding Persian attempts to achieve similar tactical advantages. The psychological impact of early Greek successes began to affect Persian morale as crews witnessed supposedly inferior opponents achieving tactical victories through superior seamanship and tactical coordination. Persian sailors, many of whom had never experienced significant naval defeats, found their confidence shaken by encounters with Greek vessels that seemed to anticipate their movements while delivering attacks with devastating precision. The sight of Persian ships listing and sinking in waters that should have witnessed easy imperial victory created doubt and hesitation that spread through Persian formations as individual ship encounters accumulated into broader tactical patterns. Xerxes, observing the battle's development from his elevated position, witnessed tactical situations that contradicted his expectations and challenged fundamental assumptions about Persian military superiority. The king had anticipated watching Persian naval power systematically destroy Greek resistance, while his scribes recorded the names of commanders who distinguished themselves in the empire's final victory over European opposition. Instead, he observed Persian ships struggling against opponents whose tactical effectiveness seemed to increase as the battle progressed, with Greek vessels achieving coordinated attacks that suggested sophisticated command and control capabilities. Persian attempts to adapt their tactics to the unexpected conditions encountered in Salamis waters demonstrated imperial military flexibility while revealing the limitations that geographical constraints imposed on traditional Persian fighting methods. Persian commanders ordered their ships to concentrate attacks on isolated Greek vessels while avoiding the narrow passages where Greek tactical advantages proved most decisive. These tactical modifications achieved some local successes but failed to address the fundamental problem that the battle's geography favoured Greek defensive methods over Persian offensive capabilities. The collapse of Persian naval coordination began as individual ship losses accumulated into squadron-level defeats that disrupted imperial command structures and tactical planning. Persian vessels, attempting to withdraw from unsuccessful attacks, found themselves constrained by the same geographical features that had limited their initial deployment options. The narrow channels that had prevented effective Persian concentration now trapped damaged ships in positions where Greek forces could complete their destruction, while preventing Persian reinforcements from providing effective support. Greek exploitation of their tactical advantages demonstrated the effectiveness of Themistocles' strategic vision, while revealing the capabilities that Athenian naval investment had created. Greek squadrons, operating under unified command despite their diverse origins, achieved coordinated attacks that maximized their collective effectiveness, while individual Greek ships demonstrated seamanship skills that enabled them to survive in combat situations where minor tactical errors would have resulted in destruction. The combination of superior equipment, intensive training, and tactical innovation created Greek naval capabilities that exceeded Persian expectations and challenged imperial assumptions about the inevitability of Persian victory. Persian casualties mounted as the battle progressed, with entire squadrons suffering destruction while surviving Persian vessels struggled to maintain formation integrity under sustained Greek pressure. The loss of experienced crews represented particularly serious damage to Persian naval capabilities, as these personnel possessed specialized knowledge and skills that could not be quickly replaced even with the empire's vast human resources. Persian ship construction, while impressive in scale and general quality, proved inferior to Greek vessels in the specific conditions encountered at Salamis, where maneuverability and crew coordination determined tactical outcomes more than raw size or decorative magnificence. The turning point of the battle came when Persian attempts to outflank Greek positions through secondary channels resulted in tactical disasters that eliminated entire Persian squadrons while exposing additional imperial forces to coordinated Greek attacks. Persian ships, attempting to navigate unfamiliar waters while under combat pressure, found themselves trapped in positions where Greek knowledge of local conditions provided decisive advantages. Greek vessels, operating in waters where every reef and current pattern was familiar, achieved tactical positions that enabled them to attack Persian flanks while avoiding effective retaliation. Xerxes' reaction to the unfolding disaster reflected both his personal shock at witnessing Persian defeat and his recognition that the battle's outcome would have profound implications for imperial prestige and strategic planning. The king, who had expected to observe the final destruction of Greek resistance, instead witnessed the systematic defeat of imperial naval forces by opponents whose capabilities had been consistently underestimated by Persian intelligence assessments. The visible destruction of Persian ships within sight of the royal observation position created a public relations catastrophe that would affect imperial credibility throughout the known world. Persian attempts to salvage tactical advantage from the deteriorating situation proved futile as Greek forces pressed their advantages while maintaining tactical coordination that prevented Persian recovery. The confined waters that had initially seemed to trap Greek forces now became a killing ground, where Persian ships found themselves unable to escape, while Greek attacks continued with devastating effectiveness. Persian naval commanders, trained in traditional imperial tactics that emphasized overwhelming force applied through coordinated mass attacks, found themselves unable to adapt to tactical situations where their fundamental advantages had been neutralized or transformed into disadvantages. The final phase of the battle witnessed complete collapse of Persian naval organization as surviving imperial vessels attempted individual escape, while Greek forces pursued and destroyed scattered opponents. Persian ships that had entered the straits in disciplined formations reflecting imperial military excellence now fled in disorder, while Greek triremes demonstrated their superior speed and maneuverability in pursuit operations. The transformation from organized imperial assault to chaotic retreat occurred within hours, demonstrating how rapidly tactical advantages could shift when geographical and technical factors combined with superior tactical preparation. Persian losses at Salamis exceeded 200 ships, along with thousands of experienced crew members whose deaths represented irreplaceable damage to imperial naval capabilities. The destruction included vessels from throughout the empire's maritime territories, with Phoenician, Egyptian and Cilician contingents suffering particularly severe casualties that would affect imperial naval operations for years to come. The loss of these specialized forces eliminated capabilities that had required decades to develop, while creating gaps in imperial military organization that could not be filled through simple recruitment of additional personnel. Greek casualties, while significant in absolute terms, represented a much smaller proportion of their total naval strength, and included fewer irreplaceable specialists whose loss would compromise future operations. The preservation of experienced Athenian crews in particular maintained Greek naval capabilities, while providing veterans whose combat experience would prove valuable in training additional personnel for continued resistance operations. Greek ship losses, while painful for cities with limited resources, did not fundamentally compromise Greek naval effectiveness or eliminate essential capabilities for future operations. The strategic implications of Salamis extended far beyond immediate tactical considerations to encompass fundamental changes in the balance of power between the Persian Empire and the Greek world. Persian naval supremacy, which had enabled imperial expansion throughout the Mediterranean and had provided essential support for land operations, had been shattered in a single day's fighting. Greek confidence, shaken by the disasters at Thermopylae and the destruction of Athens, was restored through visible proof that Persian forces could be defeated when engaged under favourable tactical conditions. Xerxes' decision to return to Asia reflected both personal humiliation at witnessing Persian defeat and realistic assessment of the strategic situation that Salamis had created. The king's presence in Europe had been justified by expectations of rapid, decisive victory that would establish permanent Persian control over Greek territories while demonstrating imperial power to audiences throughout the known world. The failure to achieve these objectives, combined with the visible destruction of Persian naval forces, created political pressures within the empire that required the king's immediate attention to prevent challenges to royal authority from developing among Persian nobility or provincial governors. The Persian withdrawal involved leaving Mardonius with a reduced army tasked with completing the conquest of Greece through land operations alone, without the naval support that had been essential for previous Persian military successes. This strategic modification reflected Xerxes' recognition that continued personal involvement in Greek operations carried unacceptable political risks, while acknowledging that imperial prestige required some form of successful conclusion to the European campaign. Mardonius, as an experienced general with extensive knowledge of Greek affairs, represented the empire's best hope for salvaging strategic advantage from the tactical disaster that Salamis had created. Persian naval forces remaining in Greek waters after Salamis faced fundamentally altered strategic circumstances that limited their operational effectiveness while exposing them to continued Greek attacks. The loss of numerical superiority eliminated Persian ability to control Aegean sea lanes, while Greek naval confidence, enhanced by their victory, enabled more aggressive operations against Persian positions and supply lines. Persian commanders found themselves forced into defensive operations designed to preserve remaining forces rather than pursuing offensive objectives that had motivated the original expedition. Greek naval superiority, established through their victory at Salamis, created strategic opportunities that extended throughout the Aegean world while providing foundations for future offensive operations against Persian territories. Greek control of sea communications enabled coordination between different Greek cities while preventing Persian forces from receiving adequate supplies or reinforcements from Asian territories. The psychological impact of Greek victory resonated throughout the Greek world, encouraging resistance movements in Persian-controlled territories, while demonstrating that imperial expansion could be stopped through coordinated defensive efforts and superior tactical preparation. The winter of 480-479 BC found Mardonius commanding a substantially reduced but still formidable Persian army in central Greece, facing strategic challenges that his predecessors had never encountered during the empire's relentless expansion across 3 continents. The naval catastrophe at Salamis had fundamentally altered the campaign's parameters, eliminating the maritime supremacy that had enabled Persian forces to coordinate land and sea operations while maintaining secure supply lines to Asian territories. Mardonius now commanded approximately 300,000 troops, including the elite Persian and Median contingents that formed the expedition's core, but these forces operated without the logistical flexibility and tactical options that naval support had previously provided. Persian winter quarters in Thessaly and Boeotia demonstrated both the army's continued operational capabilities and the growing constraints that limited imperial strategic options. Mardonius established his headquarters at Thebes, where the local oligarchy's collaboration with Persian forces provided essential local knowledge and administrative support for maintaining army supplies during the harsh winter months. Theban cooperation reflected calculated political decisions by Greek aristocrats who viewed Persian victory as inevitable and sought to preserve their authority through accommodation with imperial power rather than futile resistance that would result in their destruction. The Persian general's diplomatic initiatives during the winter months revealed sophisticated understanding of Greek political dynamics combined with realistic assessment of the military challenges that awaited imperial forces when campaigning resumed in spring. Mardonius dispatched embassies to Athens carrying offers that demonstrated Persian flexibility in dealing with stubborn opponents while maintaining essential imperial objectives. The terms proposed to Athens included restoration of their territory, reconstruction of destroyed temples at Persian expense, expansion of Athenian territorial holdings, and formal recognition as Persian allies rather than subjects, conditions that represented unprecedented imperial generosity toward a rebellious population. These diplomatic overtures served multiple strategic purposes beyond simple negotiation, providing Persian intelligence officers with opportunities to assess Athenian morale and political unity, while identifying potential collaborators within the democratic leadership. Persian agents operating under diplomatic cover gathered detailed information about Athenian military preparations, resource constraints, and factional divisions that might be exploited through continued political warfare. The embassy's reception in Athens would also provide valuable intelligence about Greek determination to continue resistance, despite the enormous costs that prolonged warfare imposed on their limited resources. The Athenian response to Persian diplomatic initiatives demonstrated both the democratic system's capacity for principled decision-making under extreme pressure and the fundamental incompatibility between Greek political values and Persian imperial ideology. The Athenian assembly rejected Mardonius's offers with declarations that emphasized their commitment to Greek independence and their refusal to accept subordinate status within the Persian imperial system, regardless of the material benefits that collaboration might provide. Athenian speakers emphasized that freedom could not be purchased through Persian generosity, and that democratic institutions required political independence to function effectively. Spartan reactions to intelligence reports about Persian diplomatic activities revealed deep concerns about potential Athenian defection and recognition that Greek unity remained fragile despite the psychological boost provided by Salamis' victory. Spartan authorities understood that Athenian naval power was essential for continued Greek resistance, and that Persian success in detaching Athens from the Greek alliance would eliminate realistic prospects for defeating imperial forces through conventional military operations. Spartan diplomatic missions to Athens during the winter months emphasized Peloponnesian commitment to continued resistance, while offering assurances of military support for Athenian territorial defense. Persian military preparations during the winter focused on adapting imperial tactical methods to European geographical conditions, while addressing logistical challenges that had become more acute following the loss of naval support. Persian engineers constructed supply depots throughout central Greece, while developing overland transportation networks that could maintain army effectiveness without relying on sea communications that Greek naval forces now threatened. These preparations required substantial labour forces drawn from local populations and Persian military personnel, creating construction projects that demonstrated imperial engineering capabilities while providing employment for Greek communities that had submitted to Persian authority. Mardonius's strategic planning reflected careful analysis of Greek military capabilities, combined with recognition that imperial forces needed decisive victory during the upcoming campaign season to justify continued Persian commitment to European operations. The general understood that prolonged warfare favoured Greek defenders who could receive supplies and reinforcements from unconquered territories, while Persian forces operated at the end of extended supply lines that stretched back to Asian satrapies. Persian strategic objectives required either destroying Greek military resistance completely or achieving political settlements that would establish permanent imperial control over strategic territories. Persian intelligence assessments during the winter months provided detailed information about Greek military preparations and political developments that would influence the spring campaign's outcome. Persian agents reported substantial Greek recruitment efforts throughout the Peloponnese and central Greece, with cities that had remained neutral during the previous year's fighting now committing forces to anti-Persian coalitions. These intelligence reports also identified continuing tensions between Athens and Sparta over strategic priorities and command arrangements, divisions that Persian diplomacy hoped to exploit through carefully targeted political warfare. The Persian decision to reoccupy Athens in June 479 BC represented both a strategic necessity and a calculated psychological gesture designed to demonstrate continued imperial power while pressuring Greek morale through visible control of Attica's agricultural resources. Mardonius led substantial Persian forces back into Athenian territory, systematically destroying crops and infrastructure that had been rebuilt during the winter months while establishing military positions that threatened Greek supply lines and communication networks. The reoccupation served notice that Persian forces retained operational initiative while creating tactical situations that would force Greek armies to respond according to Persian strategic preferences. Persian treatment of Athenian territory during the second occupation reflected deliberate policies designed to maximize economic damage while demonstrating the costs of continued resistance to imperial authority. Persian forces systematically destroyed olive groves, vineyards, and agricultural installations that represented decades of investment and provided essential economic foundations for Athenian prosperity. The destruction extended beyond immediate military necessity to encompass cultural and religious sites that had escaped damage during the previous year's occupation, eliminating symbols of Athenian identity while proclaiming Persian determination to erase Greek independence completely. Greek mobilization in response to the Persian reoccupation of Athens produced the largest military force that Greek cities had ever assembled for coordinated operations, demonstrating both the effectiveness of Hellenic League organization and the desperation that motivated Greek resistance efforts. Spartan authorities, overcoming traditional reluctance to commit forces outside the Peloponnese, authorized full military mobilization that included 5,000 Spartiates supported by 35,000 Helots and Perioeci, representing the largest Spartan army deployment in the city's history. Athenian forces, despite their territorial displacement, contributed 8,000 hoplites whose equipment and training reflected the military improvements that had characterized Athenian development during the previous decade. Pausanias, serving as regent for the young Spartan king Pleistarchus, assumed overall command of Greek forces through his royal connections and demonstrated military competence, though his authority required careful management of competing interests among diverse Greek contingents. The appointment reflected Spartan military prestige, while acknowledging practical requirements for unified command during complex operations against experienced Persian opponents. Pausanias possessed extensive military training and theoretical knowledge of Persian tactical methods, but lacked the combat experience against imperial forces that would prove essential for tactical decision-making during the approaching confrontation. Greek strategic planning emphasized forcing Persian forces to fight under conditions that would maximize Greek tactical advantages while minimizing Persian strengths in archery, cavalry, and coordinated light infantry operations. Greek commanders recognized that Persian numerical superiority remained substantial despite winter losses, and that imperial forces retained significant advantages in mobility and tactical flexibility that could prove decisive if battles developed according to Persian strategic preferences. Greek tactical doctrine required creating situations where Persian advantages would be neutralized, while Greek heavy infantry formations could engage imperial forces in close combat where superior equipment and training would determine outcomes. The march toward Plataea involved complex logistical coordination between Greek contingents from dozens of cities, each maintaining their traditional military organization while operating under unified strategic direction. Greek supply arrangements reflected both the alliance's organizational capabilities and the resource constraints that limited Greek operational flexibility compared to Persian forces that could draw upon imperial administrative systems for logistical support. Greek armies carried limited supplies while depending on local resources and supply lines that Persian cavalry could potentially disrupt through raids against Greek rear areas. Persian defensive preparations at Plataea demonstrated Mardonius's tactical acumen, while revealing his understanding of the geographical factors that would influence battle outcomes. The Persian general positioned his forces on terrain that provided advantages for cavalry operations while maintaining access to supply lines that connected imperial positions with friendly territories in northern Greece. Persian engineers constructed field fortifications that provided protection for infantry formations while creating tactical flexibility that would enable rapid concentration of force at decisive points during battle operations. The Persian battle line at Plataea extended across several miles of relatively flat terrain, with national contingents positioned according to their military capabilities and political reliability. Persian and Median forces held the army's right wing, the position of honour that reflected their elite status, while placing the most experienced troops opposite the Spartan contingent that anchored the Greek left wing. Boeotian and other Greek allies serving Persian interests occupied the centre of the imperial line, their local knowledge and equipment providing tactical advantages, while their political loyalty remained questionable under combat pressure. Persian tactical planning emphasized coordinated attacks by cavalry and archery units designed to disrupt Greek formations before committing infantry forces to decisive close combat. Persian commanders understood that Greek heavy infantry possessed significant advantages in hand-to-hand fighting, and that the imperial victory required preventing Greeks from engaging under conditions that maximized their tactical strengths. Persian cavalry, numbering several thousand experienced horsemen drawn from throughout the empire, could potentially achieve tactical breakthroughs that would enable exploitation by infantry reserves positioned for rapid deployment. Greek deployment at Plataea reflected careful consideration of Persian tactical capabilities, combined with realistic assessment of Greek strengths and limitations in confronting imperial forces under European battlefield conditions. Pausanias positioned Spartan forces opposite the Persian elite units, accepting the challenge of direct confrontation between the two armies' most capable formations, while demonstrating Greek confidence in their tactical superiority. Athenian contingents faced Boeotian and other Greek allies, serving Persian interests, creating tactical situations where political and military factors would combine to influence battle outcomes. The initial phases of combat at Plataea developed according to Persian tactical doctrine, with imperial cavalry and archer units conducting coordinated attacks designed to disrupt Greek formations while inflicting casualties that would weaken Greek resolve before decisive infantry engagements commenced. Persian horse archers demonstrated exceptional skill in conducting harassment attacks against Greek positions, while avoiding direct confrontation with Greek heavy infantry formations that could inflict devastating casualties on cavalry units caught in close combat. Persian archery units, positioned to provide supporting fire for cavalry operations, maintained steady pressure on Greek lines, while conserving ammunition for critical moments when concentrated missile fire could achieve tactical breakthroughs. Greek responses to Persian harassment tactics revealed both the effectiveness of their tactical training and the challenges of maintaining formation integrity under sustained missile attack. Greek hoplites, protected by bronze armour and large shields, absorbed Persian archery with acceptable casualty rates, while maintaining disciplined formations that prevented Persian cavalry from achieving tactical penetration. Greek light infantry, though outnumbered by Persian skirmishing forces, provided essential screening services that enabled Greek heavy infantry to maintain tactical cohesion while preparing for decisive engagements. The death of Mecistius, the Persian cavalry commander, during early combat phases provided Greek forces with crucial psychological victory, while demonstrating that imperial forces were not invincible despite their tactical advantages and superior numbers. Mecistius had led Persian cavalry operations with exceptional skill and personal courage, his golden armour and white horse making him a visible symbol of Persian military excellence that inspired imperial troops while intimidating Greek opponents. His death in combat with Greek infantry eliminated experienced leadership, while providing tangible proof that Persian commanders could be defeated through superior Greek fighting methods. Persian tactical adaptations following Mecistius's death revealed imperial military flexibility, while demonstrating the challenges that Persian forces faced in maintaining operational effectiveness without experienced leadership. Persian cavalry operations became more cautious and less aggressive, reducing their tactical impact while enabling Greek forces to consolidate their positions and prepare for the decisive infantry engagements that would determine battle outcomes. Persian commanders attempted to compensate for reduced cavalry effectiveness through increased reliance on archery and light infantry operations, but these tactical modifications failed to achieve the disruption of Greek formations that Persian strategy required. Greek tactical patience during the extended preliminary phases of combat demonstrated disciplined adherence to strategic planning while revealing the psychological pressure that Persian harassment tactics created even when they failed to achieve decisive tactical results. Greek commanders understood that premature commitment to offensive operations would expose their forces to Persian tactical advantages while abandoning the defensive benefits that their chosen positions provided. Greek tactical doctrine required waiting for optimal conditions that would enable coordinated attacks against Persian positions while minimizing exposure to imperial cavalry and archery capabilities. The climactic phase of combat began when Persian forces, frustrated by their inability to achieve tactical breakthroughs through cavalry and missile attacks, committed their infantry reserves to direct assaults against Greek positions. Persian infantry, including elite immortal units and experienced median formations, advanced with discipline and courage that reflected imperial military traditions, while demonstrating the tactical skills that had enabled Persian expansion across diverse geographical and cultural environments. These attacks created the decisive confrontations between opposing infantry formations that would determine the campaign's ultimate outcome through direct tests of equipment, training, and tactical doctrine. The collision between Spartan and Persian infantry formations represented one of ancient warfare's most significant tactical encounters, pitting Greek heavy infantry methods against imperial fighting techniques that had proven successful throughout decades of conquest. Spartan hoplites, fighting in coordinated phalanx formations with bronze-tipped spears and large shields, possessed advantages in close combat that their intensive training had developed to exceptional levels. Persian infantry, equipped with lighter armour and shorter spears but supported by extensive archery capabilities, relied on tactical flexibility and numerical superiority to overcome Greek defensive advantages. Mardonius's personal leadership during the critical infantry engagement demonstrated both his military competence and his recognition that Persian strategic objectives required decisive victory that could only be achieved through direct commitment of imperial forces to close combat. The Persian general led elite troops in attacks against Spartan positions while maintaining tactical coordination that maximized Persian advantages in numbers and supporting arms. His death during these engagements eliminated experienced command leadership while creating psychological shock that spread through Persian formations as news of their general's fate became known. The collapse of Persian resistance following Mardonius's death revealed the extent to which imperial military effectiveness depended on experienced leadership and centralized command structures. Persian forces, deprived of unified direction and shaken by visible evidence of their commander's defeat, began withdrawing from combat in disorder that prevented effective tactical coordination. Greek forces, recognizing the opportunity that Persian disorganization provided, pressed their attacks with increased aggression, while maintaining formation discipline that enabled them to exploit Persian tactical weaknesses. Persian casualties at Plataea exceeded 100,000 troops, including substantial numbers of experienced personnel whose loss eliminated essential capabilities for future imperial operations in European territories. The destruction encompassed entire Persian and Median units that had formed the expedition's elite corps, while Allied contingents suffered proportionally severe losses that eliminated their military effectiveness. Persian equipment losses included weapons, armour, and supplies that represented substantial economic value, while their capture provided Greek forces with material benefits that partially compensated for their own campaign expenses. Simultaneously, Greek naval forces under Athenian command achieved decisive victory at Mycale against Persian naval installations and supporting troops, completing the destruction of imperial military power in the Aegean region while liberating Ionian Greek cities that had remained under Persian control since the suppression of their revolt 2 decades earlier. The battle developed when Greek ships, encouraged by intelligence reports of Persian demoralization following Plataea, launched coordinated attacks against Persian positions on the Anatolian coast where imperial naval forces had established defensive installations. The Persian position at Mycale reflected strategic decisions to concentrate remaining naval resources in defensible positions, where land-based fortifications could provide protection against Greek naval attacks while maintaining capabilities for future operations. Persian commanders had beached their remaining ships while constructing field fortifications that integrated naval personnel with land forces drawn from local garrisons and allied contingents. These preparations demonstrated Persian tactical adaptation to change strategic circumstances while revealing the defensive mindset that had replaced earlier imperial confidence in offensive operations. Greek naval operations at Mycale showcased the tactical innovations and crew capabilities that Athenian naval investment had created during the previous decade of intensive preparation. Greek triremes, operating with the tactical flexibility that their victory at Salamis had demonstrated, achieved coordinated amphibious assaults that overcame Persian defensive preparations through superior seamanship and tactical coordination. Greek marines, supported by hoplite contingents transported aboard the fleet, demonstrated combined arms capabilities that enabled them to defeat Persian forces fighting from prepared positions. The liberation of Ionian cities following the Greek victory at Mycale restored Greek control over territories that had been lost during the Persian expansion of the previous century, while eliminating Persian naval capabilities in the Aegean Sea. Greek forces systematically destroyed Persian installations and administrative centres, while encouraging local populations to resume their traditional political institutions and cultural practices. These operations completed the reversal of Persian expansion in European and Aegean territories, while establishing foundations for future Greek offensive operations against Persian positions in Anatolia and the eastern Mediterranean. The twin victories at Plataea and Mycale in 479 BC marked more than the conclusion of Xerxes' invasion. They represented a fundamental transformation in the balance of power across the Mediterranean world that would reshape political, cultural, and intellectual development for centuries to come. The immediate aftermath of these battles witnessed scenes that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Persian survivors fleeing across the Aegean in commandeered fishing boats, their once magnificent equipment abandoned on Greek battlefields, while Greek forces systematically dismantled the infrastructure of imperial control that had dominated the region for over half a century. The psychological impact of Greek victory extended far beyond the immediate participants to affect populations throughout the known world who had witnessed Persian expansion with a mixture of awe and resignation. Persian imperial ideology had presented the great king's authority as divinely ordained and historically inevitable, supported by military capabilities that had proven irresistible across 3 continents. The spectacle of Persian defeat, achieved by relatively small Greek forces fighting for their independence, challenged fundamental assumptions about imperial power while demonstrating that determined resistance could overcome seemingly impossible odds through superior organisation, tactical innovation, and unwavering commitment to political principles. Greek confidence, transformed by victory from desperate hope into aggressive self-assurance, manifested in immediate decisions that revealed the scope of their strategic ambitions and their recognition that defensive success provided opportunities for broader offensive operations. Athenian naval forces, no longer constrained by the need to protect home territories from immediate invasion, began systematic operations against Persian positions throughout the Aegean, while encouraging rebellions in territories that had submitted to imperial authority during the previous decades of expansion. Spartan land forces, despite traditional reluctance to engage in extended overseas operations, participated in campaigns that extended Greek influence into regions that had never experienced independent Greek political control. The Persian withdrawal from European territories proceeded with systematic thoroughness that reflected both military necessity and political calculation within imperial administrative circles. Persian commanders recognized that continued operations in Greece had become strategically impossible without naval support and adequate supply lines, while the enormous casualties suffered during the previous year's campaigns had eliminated essential military capabilities that could not be quickly replaced, even with the empire's vast human resources. Persian administrative personnel systematically destroyed installations and documentation that could provide intelligence to Greek forces while evacuating collaborators and valuable equipment that could support future imperial operations in other theatres. Within the Persian Empire itself, news of the Greek disasters created political pressures that required immediate attention from royal authorities concerned about maintaining imperial unity and preventing challenges to central authority. Provincial governors throughout the empire received detailed reports about Persian military failures while observing local populations for signs of rebellion or disloyalty that might be encouraged by evidence of imperial vulnerability. Xerxes faced the enormous challenge of maintaining imperial prestige and administrative effectiveness, while acknowledging military defeats that contradicted fundamental assumptions about Persian invincibility and divine favour. Persian strategic reassessment following the Greek campaigns resulted in fundamental modifications to imperial expansion policies that emphasized consolidation of existing territories rather than continued aggressive expansion into new regions. Persian military doctrine incorporated lessons learned from Greek tactical innovations while developing defensive strategies designed to protect imperial heartlands against potential Greek offensive operations. Persian diplomatic initiatives sought to prevent the formation of broader anti-Persian coalitions while offering incentives for Greek cities to accept negotiated settlements rather than continuing military operations that could threaten Persian positions throughout Anatolia and the eastern Mediterranean. The formation of the Delian League in 478 BC represented the institutionalization of Greek military cooperation that had proven effective during the Persian Wars, while creating organizational structures that would enable coordinated offensive operations against remaining Persian positions. The League's establishment on the sacred island of Delos, with its treasury housed in Apollo's temple, provided religious legitimacy for Greek military cooperation, while symbolizing the defensive purposes that officially motivated the alliance. Member cities contributed ships or monetary payments according to assessments that reflected their military capabilities and economic resources, creating a coordinated military organization that could maintain substantial naval forces for extended operations. Athenian leadership of the Delian League emerged naturally from the city's naval capabilities and demonstrated expertise in anti-Persian operations, but also reflected deliberate Athenian political maneuvering designed to establish permanent influence over Greek strategic planning and resource allocation. Athenian naval supremacy, established through their victories at Salamis and Mycale, provided essential capabilities that other Greek cities could not match, while creating dependencies that enable Athens to influence League policies according to their strategic preferences. Athenian administrative expertise, developed through democratic institutional innovations, offered organizational models that could coordinate complex military operations involving diverse Greek communities with varying political traditions and military capabilities. The early operations of the Delian League demonstrated both the effectiveness of coordinated Greek military action and the aggressive strategic vision that motivated Athenian leadership. Greek naval forces systematically eliminated Persian strongholds throughout the Aegean, while liberating Greek cities that had remained under imperial control since the suppression of the Ionian Revolt. The siege of Eion in 476 BC showcased Greek capabilities in conducting complex military operations that combined naval and land forces in coordinated assaults against fortified Persian positions, while the capture of Syros eliminated pirate bases that had threatened Greek commercial activities for generations. Persian responses to Greek offensive operations revealed both imperial military resilience and the strategic constraints that limited effective Persian retaliation against Greek expansion. Persian forces, while capable of defending major strongholds and maintaining control over essential territories, lacked the naval capabilities necessary for offensive operations against Greek island bases or coastal positions. Persian diplomatic initiatives sought to exploit Greek factional divisions while offering territorial concessions and commercial privileges that might detach individual cities from the Delian League. But these efforts achieved limited success against Greek confidence and unity that had been strengthened by military victory. The transformation of the Delian League from defensive alliance into Athenian empire occurred gradually through administrative and political developments that reflected both practical necessities and deliberate Athenian policies designed to establish permanent hegemony over Greek affairs. League operations required coordinated decision-making and resource allocation that naturally favoured Athenian preferences, while Athenian naval supremacy created dependencies that enabled Athens to influence or coerce reluctant allies into compliance with League policies. Athenian officials gradually assumed administrative responsibilities throughout League territories, while Athenian legal procedures and commercial practices became standard throughout the alliance. The suppression of the Naxian Revolt in 470 BC marked a crucial turning point in League development, establishing precedents for Athenian coercion of member cities that attempted to withdraw from the alliance or reduce their military contributions. Athenian forces besieged Naxos until the city submitted to continued League membership, while accepting increased tribute payments and the installation of Athenian administrative personnel to ensure future compliance. These operations demonstrated that League membership had become mandatory rather than voluntary, while revealing Athenian willingness to use military force against fellow Greeks who challenged their authority. The revolt of Thasos in 465 BC provided additional evidence of growing tensions between Athenian imperial ambitions and traditional Greek concepts of political independence. Thasian attempts to withdraw from the League following disputes over mining rights and commercial privileges resulted in a 2-year siege that ended with complete Athenian victory and the imposition of harsh terms that eliminated Thasian political autonomy. The siege operations demonstrated advanced Athenian military capabilities while revealing the systematic nature of Athenian imperial control that extended beyond simple military alliance into comprehensive political and economic domination. Persian efforts to exploit Greek internal conflicts through diplomatic and military intervention achieved limited success during the early decades following their withdrawal from Europe, but demonstrated continued imperial interest in preventing Greek consolidation that could threaten Persian positions in Anatolia and the eastern Mediterranean. Persian support for Spartan operations against Athens during the 460s reflected imperial recognition that Greek unity posed greater threats to Persian security than Greek internal warfare, while Persian diplomatic initiatives sought to encourage conflicts that would prevent Greek offensive operations against imperial territories. The cultural and intellectual flowering that characterized the classical period emerged directly from the confidence and resources that Greek victory in the Persian Wars had created, while the political institutions and social relationships that developed during the conflict provided foundations for unprecedented achievements in philosophy, literature, and artistic expression. Athenian democracy, tested and strengthened through the challenges of organizing resistance to Persian invasion, evolved into sophisticated political systems that emphasize citizen participation and rational debate about public policy. Democratic institutions created environments where intellectual innovation could flourish, while providing social mobility that enabled talented individuals from diverse backgrounds to contribute to cultural development. The wealth that flowed into Athens through Delian League tribute and expanded commercial relationships provided resources for architectural projects and artistic patronage that transformed the city into the cultural centre of the Greek world. The reconstruction of the Acropolis, destroyed during Persian occupation, became a symbol of Athenian achievement and Greek cultural superiority over Persian imperial power. The Parthenon and other architectural monuments demonstrated Greek artistic capabilities while proclaiming Athenian leadership of Greek civilization through visible displays of cultural sophistication and economic prosperity. Philosophical developments during the classical period reflected intellectual confidence that Greek victory had inspired, while addressing fundamental questions about human nature, political organization, and moral responsibility that the Persian Wars had raised. Socratic methods of rational inquiry challenged traditional assumptions about knowledge and authority while encouraging systematic examination of ethical and political questions that democratic citizenship required. The development of historical writing, exemplified by Herodotus's account of the Persian Wars, represented new approaches to understanding human behavior and political development that emphasized rational analysis over mythological explanation. Dramatic literature reached unprecedented heights during the classical period through works that explored themes of individual responsibility, political obligation, and divine justice that the Persian Wars had made central to Greek cultural consciousness. Aeschylus, who had fought at Marathon and probably at Salamis, created tragedies that examined the relationship between human action and divine will, while celebrating Greek achievements against Persian invasion. Sophocles and Euripides developed dramatic techniques that explored psychological complexity and moral ambiguity, while addressing questions about leadership, citizenship, and cultural identity that democratic society had made relevant to ordinary citizens. Scientific and mathematical innovations during the classical period reflected intellectual approaches that emphasized systematic observation and logical reasoning over traditional religious or mythological explanations for natural phenomena. Greek achievements in geometry, astronomy, and medicine demonstrated capabilities for abstract thinking and empirical investigation that supported technological developments in architecture, engineering, and military science. These intellectual developments created cultural foundations that would influence Western civilization for millennia, while establishing patterns of rational inquiry that became characteristic of Greek approaches to understanding the natural and human worlds. The long-term historical significance of the Greco-Persian Wars extended far beyond their immediate military and political consequences to encompass fundamental concepts about cultural identity, political freedom, and the relationship between East and West that would influence historical development throughout subsequent centuries. Greek victory established precedents for successful resistance to imperial expansion, while demonstrating that smaller political entities could maintain independence through superior organization, tactical innovation, and commitment to shared values. These lessons would inspire resistance movements throughout history, while providing models for political organisation that emphasise citizen participation and collective decision-making. The narrative framework that emerged from Greek accounts of the Persian Wars created enduring stereotypes about Eastern despotism and Western freedom that would influence political thought and cultural identity throughout the development of Western civilization. Greek writers portrayed the conflict as a struggle between fundamentally different political and social systems, with Persian imperial autocracy representing tyranny and cultural stagnation, while Greek democracy embodied freedom and intellectual progress. These interpretive frameworks, while often historically inaccurate or oversimplified, provided conceptual tools for understanding cultural differences and political conflicts that would remain influential throughout subsequent historical development. The Persian Wars thus marked not merely the successful defence of Greek independence, but the birth of the classical age that would establish intellectual, artistic, and political foundations for Western civilization. The confidence gained through victory over the world's greatest empire enabled Greek achievements in philosophy, democracy, literature, and science that would influence human development for millennia. The transformation of defensive alliance into Athenian empire demonstrated both the opportunities and dangers that military success created for political development, while the cultural flowering that followed Greek victory revealed the creative potential that freedom and prosperity could unleash when combined with intellectual curiosity and artistic ambition. The legacy of Marathon, Salamis, and Plataea extended far beyond the battlefields where Greek warriors had faced Persian invasion to encompass the fundamental concepts of political freedom, cultural achievement, and rational inquiry that would define the classical world and influence all subsequent Western civilization.